Chapter 1193. Duguchyomo raised his sword and a burst of sword intent spread around him. As the sword intent spread out, the blood-red sky seemed to be filled with rolling thunderclouds and thunder. It was the peerless lightning sword principle. In fact, the Azura sword principle was the most suitable for Duguchyomo's own power attribute. However, because his opponent was Gu Xiaoyang, it was inevitable that he would be confused and notice if he used the Azura sword principle. Therefore, Duguchyomo could only choose to use the lightning sword principle. Of course, the lightning sword principle was not inferior to the Azura sword principle in terms of explosive attack power. As Duguchyomo used the lightning sword principle, the God Devourer sword also burst out with lightning. He swung his sword and the blazing lightning swept out like a torrent, colliding with Gu Xiaoyang's starry sword light. Lightning sword principle. Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened again. This dynasty's genius that he did not take seriously at the beginning had exceeded his expectations again and again. Seeing this, Gu Xiaoyang used his ultimate move again. The starry sword intent surged and turned into a dazzling river of stars in the sky. It was the starry sword principle's sword principle domain, starry river dazzling 9 heavens. Gu Xiaoyang held the 7 stars illusionary god and swung his sword down. The river of stars fell and the sword chi surged like a vast ocean. It was so powerful that it seemed to want to wash the entire Azura blood road. Duguchyomo was also unwilling to retreat and used the lightning sword principle's sword principle domain. Heaven's punishment thunder prison. Duguchyomo raised his sword with both hands and the power of lightning surged out, turning into a dazzling ball of lightning in the sky. Then, countless bolts of lightning swarmed out like dragons, wanting to imprison this part of the world and drown everything in the lightning. This was a huge collision between 2 peerless sword principle domains, and it burst out a huge wave. The Azura Blood Road mystic realm was already on the verge of collapsing. Because of this fierce collision, it began to crumble even faster. The Azura Blood Road is about to collapse. Wan Er's beautiful eyes flashed. There was no point in continuing the fight because they would all be teleported out soon. Yitzangshan's eyes were very cold because he was busy with Princess Luoho and had no time to attack Duguchyomo. It would be strange if Yitzangshan was in a good mood when the opportunity that he had been plotting for so long had gone to someone else. Rumble. The entire Azura Blood Road was collapsing. Cracks that were tens of thousands of feet long were spreading across the sky. After the Azura Saint King's clone dissipated, the Azura Bloody Road was supposed to collapse. The battle between Gu Xiaoyang and Duguchyomo merely sped up the process. Finally, the entire Azura Blood Road mystic realm collapsed. Duguchyomo and the others were swallowed up by the space vortex and forcefully brought out of this space. At the same time, in the outside world, in the Blood Demon Valley, the atmosphere was so silent and solemn that it was somewhat frightening. And the source of this silent atmosphere came from the mystic demon palace. The expressions of the experts from the mysterious demon hall were frighteningly cold when they saw the names of Yuan Hua and Han Moz disappear from the bloodlight screen. Fan Yuan's face was filled with disbelief. He did not believe that Yuan Hua and Han Moz would die in the Azura Blood Road. However, what was more coincidental was that the 2 deaths seemed to be related to Duguchyomo. Duguchyomo's score was also ranked first. No, I don't believe that Yuan Hua would die in the hands of Duguchyomo. Fan Yuan could not believe it. Not to mention him, even Pei Tu and the others from the Heavenly Demons sect had a suspicious look. It was already surprising that Duguchyomo could kill Han Moz. But if he killed Yuan Hua, it was indeed a little unbelievable. Could there be a mistake? Even the Demon Queen's charming face showed a trace of doubt. At first, she was actually a little interested in the white-haired sword demon who was famous in the Moro dynasty and had slaughtered 13 cities. She even thought that he might be a strong contender for the position of the emperor's son-in-law. But when she saw Duguchyomo, the Demon Queen was a little disappointed. This was because Duguchyomo was not even at the divine dwelling stage. He was far from meeting the Demon Queen's requirements for her daughter's husband. Therefore, the demon queen also suspected that there was something wrong with the blood-red light curtain. Or that something else had happened in the Azura Blood Road. Maybe there's something wrong with the light curtain. Fan Yuan and the others from the Mystic Demon Palace held a glimmer of hope in their hearts. However, the blood-red door in the Blood Demon Valley suddenly trembled and was covered with cracks. Then, the space distorted and several figures were blasted out like exploding fish. They were the surviving experts. What's going on? What happened? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the scene. The Azura Blood Road is gone, a cultivator murmured absent-mindedly. What? The Moro imperial family and the people of the 6 great forces were taken aback when they heard this. The Azura Blood Road had always been one of the most famous secret domains in the Moro dynasty. How could it be gone just like that? However, the cultivators who were teleported out all described the same situation. They couldn't help but believe it. At this moment, a few more figures wrapped in brilliance appeared, accompanied by the sounds of intense clashes. It was Princess Luoho and the others. 2 of the figures were still engaged in a fierce battle. That's Duguchilma. Everyone quickly locked onto the identity of one of the figures. His white hair fluttered in the wind and blood-red chi surged. It was Duguchilma. As for the other person he was fighting, many forces and martial artists were surprised. That person is. Some people were hesitant, but soon, someone recognized him. The person fighting with Duguchilma seems to be Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion. What? Everyone was shocked as they looked towards the battle between Duguchilma and Gu Xiaoyang. They didn't expect that a heaven pride from an overlord force would come to the Moro dynasty. However, a moment later, Yizang Yue and Wan were recognized one after another, causing an uproar. What? The witch of the demonic sect. The demon queen was surprised. However, what surprised her more was that Duguchilma's strength was enough to compete with Gu Xiaoyang. But who was Gu Xiaoyang? He was one of the top 10 young masters, young master Xingyun. Didn't that mean that Duguchilma's true strength was at the level of the top 10 young masters? Upon coming to this realization, the Infernal Queen and company drew a gasp. Pei Tu of the Sky Demon sect finally made his move. He raised his hand and unleashed the strength of a false saint, separating Duguchilma and Gu Xiaoyang. You. Gu Xiaoyang's expression was cold. Young Master Gu, this is the Moro dynasty. Even if you're the heaven's pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, you should know how to restrain yourself. Duguchilma is the saint of the Sky Demon sect. I can't just watch you fight, Pei Tu said in a deep voice. Now that Duguchilma had won first place in the Azura Blood Road, he had endless potential and was strong enough to compete with the top 10 young masters. He was the treasure of the Sky Demon sect. How could Pei Tu just watch Gu Xiaoyang attack Duguchilma? However, because of Gu Xiaoyang's background, Pei Tu couldn't really do anything to him. Otherwise, he might incur the wrath of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. Chapter 1194. You want to stop me? Gu Xiaoyang's face turned ugly. Pei Tu said coldly, Young Master Gu, please pay attention to your words. Although you are a heaven pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, I am also a false saint expert. A false saint expert had the dignity of a false saint expert. Even if Gu Xiaoyang had an extraordinary background, he was still only a divine-dwelling heaven pride. It was extremely disrespectful to speak to a false saint expert in such a tone. Gu Xiaoyang exhaled deeply. He knew that with a false saint expert intervening, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for him to kill Duguchilma. Duguchilma, you really only know how to be a coward, Gu Xiaoyang said coldly. You can't do anything to me. Duguchilma's face was indifferent. If Duguchilma used all his trump cards, he might be able to pose a fatal threat to Gu Xiaoyang, but Gu Xiaoyang was one of the top 10 young masters and a seed of the Starry Sword Pavilion. It was impossible for him to not have any trump cards. Therefore, if they really fought to the death, the final result would be very difficult to predict. But if Duguqiuma cultivated for a period of time, his strength would grow with time, and he might not have to pay too much of a price to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Therefore, now was not the best time to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Moreover, there was a group of people watching, and Duguqiuma did not want to use all his trump cards. If you come to participate in the Heaven Pride battlefield, I will definitely turn your bones into ashes. Gu Xiaoyang flung his sleeve, temporarily suppressing his killing intent. After all, this was the Molo Empire and not the Starry Sword Pavilion. No matter how special his identity was, it was impossible for him to kill Duguqiuma under the protection of a false saint expert. It's not certain who will be buried. Duguqiuma's lips curved into a cold smile. If he joined forces with Ye Guqin's true body at that time, it was easy to imagine how embarrassed Gu Xiaoyang would be. Fairy Cangyue, let's go, Gu Xiaoyang said softly to Yi Cangyue, who did not want to stay here any longer. Yi Cangyue's clear eyes were cold, resentful and complicated. Yi Cangyue had an indescribable feeling towards the man who had taken her virginity. However, one thing was certain. Yi Cangyue would not let Dugu off so easily. He would not let it go for all eternity. Yi Cangyue turned around and left decisively without any hesitation. Looking at Yi Cangyue's cold and lonely back, Duguqiuma actually had a rare complicated feeling in his heart. Of course, it was only a sliver. His emotions quickly returned to indifference. Yi Cangyue and Gu Xiaoyang left. On the other side, Yi Cangshin's eyes revealed a wisp of heaviness and unwillingness. Duguqiumo said indifferently, "Do you want to fight me?" He was not even afraid of Gu Xiaoyang. Although Yi Cangshin had a special background, he was not afraid of him. Yi Cangshin took a deep breath. He really wanted to fight with Duguqiuma and snatch his fortuitous opportunity. However, he couldn't do that in front of so many people. That was because his special background was too sensitive. If it was exposed, it would be extremely disadvantageous for him. "Sir, we..." His old servant, the old man at the false saint level, wanted to say something, but stopped. "Let's go first," Yi Cangshin said in a deep voice. Then, he looked at Duguqiumo and said, "Don't be too proud. That opportunity is only temporarily with you. I'll take it back in the battlefield." After saying that, Yi Cangshin and his old servant also left. At that moment, only the people from the various forces of the Molo dynasty and the demon were left. At that moment, a cold voice with murderous intent came from the mystic demon palace. The person who spoke was a false saint expert from the mystic demon palace. He did not see Yuanhua come out. His last hope was shattered. Yuanhua had really died in the Azura Bloody Road. "You killed Yuanhua and Hun Mozi?" The false saint expert from the mystic demon palace's murderous intent seemed to freeze the space. "That's right," Duguqiumo said in a casual tone. Boom. The experts from the mystic demon palace could not help but release their auras. Their eyes were overflowing with anger. How could he still be so calm after killing two heavenly talents from the mystic demon palace? It was not just the mystic demon palace. The experts from the Six Desire Demon sect also stepped out and said, "Did you also kill Miao Yu from the Six Desire Demon sect?" "Indeed," Duguqiumo said indifferently. "And Shan Yu from the Demonic Beast sect as well?" The expert from the Demonic Beast sect said coldly. "Of course," Duguqiumo said indifferently. Boom. The false saints from the three forces all looked gloomy and angry. Under such a situation, even Pei Tu felt great pressure. He, a false saint, could not resist three false saints at the same time. However, Duguqiumo was calm in the face of the three forces' murderous intent. His expression would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Because he knew that someone definitely did not want him to die. Just as the experts from the three forces could not help but want to attack, a pleasant voice with a cold intent sounded. "If you want to die, you can attack Duguqiumo." The person who spoke was Wan, or the witch. Seeing this, the experts from the three forces' expressions changed slightly. Was backed by the demonic extermination sect, an overlord force. However, they could not understand why the witch of the demonic extermination sect would protect Mo. Could it be? On the other side, the demon queen was deep in thought. She thought of the demon king ascending the 9 heavens vision that had shaken the South Horizon region. If that was the case, the demon queen took a deep breath. No wonder would protect Mo. Witch, although you are from the demonic extermination sect, this is a grudge between our forces. It has nothing to do with you, the false saint from the mystic demon palace said in a low voice. How does it have nothing to do with me? Tilted her head and asked. What does it have to do with you? The expert from the 6 Desire Demon sect said coldly. Er's words were shocking. She said directly, Mo wants to join the demonic extermination sect. Are you sure you want to attack him? What? Er's words shocked all the other forces. Their eyes bulged out of their sockets. Mo wanted to join the demonic extermination sect. The experts from the Mystic Demon Palace, the Demonic Beast sect, and the 6 Desire Demons sect all had ugly expressions. It was as if they had eaten a dead fly. They could ignore the Sky Demon sect, but they could not ignore the Demonic Extermination sect. How is this possible? How can that kid? The experts from the 3 forces clenched their fists. Although they were unwilling, they did not dare to act rashly. If what said was true, then the price they would have to pay if they killed Mo was the demonic extermination sect's revenge. The demon queen said, life and death in the Azura Blood Road are up to the heavens. Killing is not forbidden. Yuanhua's death can only be attributed to his lack of strength. Hearing the demon queen speak, the experts from the 3 forces could only swallow their anger. It was not that they did not want to deal with Mo, but the current Mo was no longer someone they could touch. Mo was slightly surprised. He did not expect the demon queen to speak up for him. One had to know that the demon queen's attitude towards him was one of disdain and neglect. The demon queen smiled and said, by the way, when the Azura Blood Road opened, I said that I would choose a husband for the princess. I wonder if you, Mo, are willing to be the prince consort of the Molo dynasty. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. Chapter 1195. Back when the Azura Blood Road had just opened, the demon queen had looked down on Mo. She even thought that he was not qualified to compete for the position of the Mara dynasty's prince consort. But now, the demon queen was so attentive to Mo that she even took the initiative to invite him. Mother, what are you talking about? Princess Luoho's face under the mask changed slightly. She did not know what to feel. Originally, she should have been repulsed by this, but now, she had a complicated feeling. I think he's very suitable to be the Mara dynasty's prince consort. The demon queen smiled. She vaguely guessed that Mo was probably the unparalleled demon king who had caused the demon king to descend to the 9th heaven. Otherwise, he would definitely not be favored by the demon queen of the demonic sect. Besides, other than Mo, she could not find a more suitable candidate. Yitsangshan came from the dark world, so he was not suitable to be the prince consort. As for Yuanhua, Soul Demon Master, and the other top 10 male skyprides of the blood ranking, they had all died in the hands of Mo. Therefore, Mo seemed to be the only candidate. Not to mention that Mo was very powerful and could compete with the 10 great childs. There was another reason why the demon queen wanted to choose a son-in-law for Princess Luoho. She wanted Princess Luoho to have someone to take care of her on the battlefield of skyprides. Mo's strength was enough to protect Princess Luoho. Pei Tu and the other experts of the Heavenly Demon sect were happy to see the demon queen's intention of marriage. On the other hand, Qingqing smiled bitterly when she saw this scene. However, she was relieved now. It was enough to have fate with Mo. Mo was not someone she could keep. The gap between her and Mo had widened. They were not even on the same level. Daughter, this is a good match. The demon queen advised with a smile. Princess Luoho did not say a word. She had always been cold and indifferent. At this moment, she had a complicated feeling like a little girl. Seeing this, Wanner smiled and said, being with Duguchio Mo won't be a bad thing, because, as Wanner spoke, she took light steps and landed beside Princess Luoho. She lowered her voice and whispered something. Princess Luoho's delicate body immediately tensed up. Her cold and beautiful eyes under the mask revealed a wisp of extreme surprise. He's actually, Shu. It's good that you know. Don't say it out loud. Wanner smiled. Princess Luoho's heart trembled, and she was momentarily stunned. Wanner had just told her that Duguchio Mo was the one who had triggered the Demon King descends to the 9 heavens. Previously, Princess Luoho had told the Infernal Queen that she was only interested in the person who had triggered the phenomenon of the heavenly baneful star and the Infernal Emperor. Never would she have thought that Duguchio Mo was the one who had triggered the Devil Emperor phenomenon. Of course, if she knew that the heavenly cursed lone star phenomenon was also triggered by Dugu's plea to the devil, she would be even more shocked. What? You still don't want to? Wanner smiled. Princess Luoho fell silent and felt a little bashful. However, from the Infernal Queen's point of view, Princess Luoho's lack of objection meant that she had agreed. Duguchio Mo, what about you? The Infernal Queen looked at Duguchio Mo. Duguchio Mo pondered for a moment. He still needed Princess Luoho's Luoho Life Providence to help him activate the heavenly baneful Life Providence. Therefore, he did not refuse and nodded lightly. When Princess Luoho saw this, an unnatural blush appeared on her usually cold face. All right, then it's decided. The Infernal Queen appeared very happy. As for the opportunity that Duguchio Mo had obtained, no one dared to target him with his current status. The Azura Bloody Path had come to an end. Of course, the Azura Bloody Path would not open again in the future because the entire mystic realm would no longer exist. And the one who had benefited the most was naturally Duguchio Mo. He had naturally replaced Yi Tsangshan as the #1 genius of the Mola dynasty. After that, Wanner also looked for Duguchio Mo alone to ask about it. She asked Duguchio Mo if he wanted to follow her back to Annihilation Demonic Sect or something else. In fact, Duguchio Mo did not need to participate in the battlefield of the elites, because he could already become a disciple of Annihilation Demonic Sect. However, Duguchio Mo still decided to participate because the battlefield of the elites was also a rare experience and opportunity. There might be an opportunity for Duguchio Mo to break through to the supremacy realm. Not to mention, he still had to work with Yi Guchen's original body to deal with Gu Xiaoyang, Huang Qinqiu, Di Haotian, and the others. Although Yi Guchen was not weak, the enemies were equally strong. No matter how strong Yi Guchen was, it was impossible for him to defeat all these opponents by himself. However, if Duguchio Mo's power was added, he would have nothing to fear if his original body and clone worked together. Seeing that Duguchio Mo was determined to participate in the battlefield of the elites, Wanner could only give up on the idea of bringing him back to the sect for the time being. You have to live well. After all, if you join Annihilation Demonic Sect in the future, you might be able to participate in the competition for the position of Junior Sect Master, Wanner said solemnly. The competition in Annihilation Demonic Sect was also fierce. We'll talk about it when the time comes, Duguchio Mo said calmly. Wanner raised her brows and said, you can't be careless. The strongest genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect is on the same level as one of the 4 princes. Oh. Duguchio Mo was surprised. He did not expect that a genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was one of the 4 princes. In other words, the genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was also on the same level as Huang Qinqiu. When the time comes, he will also participate in the battlefield of the elites. If he finds out about you, he might kill you, so be careful, Wanner warned. Got it. Duguchio Mo nodded slightly. Although there was one more potential enemy, Duguchio Mo was still not afraid. In the end, the witch also left for the time being to prepare for the battlefield of the elites. Duguchyo-mo did not return to Heavenly Demon Sect. Instead, he followed the Demon Queen and the others back to the Mara royal family. With Wan, and Annihilation demonic sect as his backing, Duguchyo-mo was not afraid that the Mara royal family would do anything to him. After returning to the Mara royal family, although Princess Luoho and Duguchyo-mo had not held their wedding ceremony for the time being, the two of them were already living in the same palace. Duguchyo-mo had borrowed Princess Luoho's Luoho life providence to comprehend his heaven fiend life providence. At the same time, because Duguchyo-mo had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, his soul-devouring demon eye had also awakened the ability of the spirit demon seed. In other words, he could plant a demon seed in the enemy's knowledge sea and enslave them. Of course, this was only effective on those who were weaker than Duguchyo-mo or those who did not have a strong soul will. The effect would be greatly reduced on the heaven prides of the same level. However, to Duguchyo-mo's surprise, Princess Luoho gritted her teeth and said she wanted him to help her deal with an opponent who had once displeased her. "Who is it?" Duguchyo-mo asked. "Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty, Duguwubai," Princess Luoho said. Princess Luoho was very upset when she thought of how she had suffered at the hands of Yiguchin in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove. "Ha, sure." Duguchyo-mo smiled. If he encountered his true body, it would not be a bad idea to spar with him. Duguchyo-mo also wanted to know who was stronger between him and his true body. Chapter 1196. After the Azura Bloody Road, Duguchyo-mo stayed in the Imperial Palace to cultivate and prepare for the Azura Bloody Road. On the other side, at the border of the Mola Empire, Yitsanyue and Gu Shaoyang flew across the sky one after another. "Young Master Gu, you don't have to follow me anymore," Yitsanyue said coldly and expressionlessly. "Fair Yitsanyue, what's wrong with you?" Gu Shaoyang asked suspiciously. Ever since Yitsanyue and Duguchyo-mo came out of the Opportunity's secret realm, Yitsanyue seemed to be in a bad mood. Although Yitsanyue was cold to him before, it was not to the point of annoyance. However, Yitsanyue was too lazy to travel with him now. "It's nothing. I'm tired. Is that okay?" Yitsanyue walked away and shook Gu Shaoyang off. "What's going on? Could it be?" "No. Impossible." Gu Shaoyang's heart skipped a beat. A thought that he found somewhat impossible emerged in his mind. "No, it can't be like this. Fairy Tsangyu must have other reasons for being so pure. Duguchyo-mo, if you participate in the prodigy battlefield, I'll kill you." Gu Shaoyang's eyes were extremely cold. On the other side, Yitsanyue held her stomach with one hand and looked confused. She felt that the immortal divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of shocking transformation. It seemed like it was about to give birth to something. "Duguchyo-mo, could it be that you..." Yitsanyue did not dare to think too deeply. There was a rare trace of confusion and uneasiness in her heart. Sword Dynasty, in the Sword Catacomb. A handsome young man in a black robe and black hair sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. A terrifying and powerful sword concept rolled around his body. It was Yiguchin. When he was alone, he would take off his grimace mask. At a certain moment, Yiguchin suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be a golden light flowing in his dark eyes. He raised his hand and the 9-dragon thunder prison fell into his hand. He pointed his sword at the sky and caused the sky to change color. Sky as Qian, then, Yiguchin pointed his other hand at the ground. Earth as Kuan, pointing up at the heavens, pointing down at the earth. Between the heavens and the earth, only I am supreme. Unifying heaven and earth, unparalleled saint sword. Yiguchin gathered his genuine chi, and an extremely dazzling golden sword aura appeared. It was like a divine light that could split the heavens and the earth. It illuminated the sky and slashed the earth. As the sword slashed down, the entire sword tomb rumbled and trembled. The sword chi storm that roiled in the surroundings all year round temporarily stopped because of this resplendent sword. In front of Yiguchin, a 300-meter-long and 10-meter-deep fissure appeared. Its destructive power was extremely strong. Is this the power of the sacred sword of heaven and earth? Yiguchin muttered to himself. During this period of time, he had always been in seclusion in the sword tomb, comprehending various sword arts and martial arts, and his gains were also great. Yiguchin had finally succeeded in his initial cultivation of the sacred sword of Qiankuan. Its power did not disappoint Yiguchin. In addition, Yiguchin had completely mastered the 8 sword moves of the 8 extremities reincarnation sword technique. Of course, Yiguchin had not completely comprehended the combination of the 8 moves yet, but he was not far away. The reincarnation sword lotus, the unique skill of the 6th generation sword master, had been completely mastered. Being able to perform the perfect 360 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus, its power was also incomparable. There was also the most important ultimate sword realm. Yiguchin could perform the combination of 3 sword realms, and its power was several times stronger than the combination of 2 sword realms. However, for the ultimate sword realm, only the combination of 4 sword realms could be considered a complete ultimate sword realm. I have gained a lot during this period of seclusion. Yiguchin exhaled softly. Although his realm did not increase, the various sword arts had increased Yiguchin's combat power. His current combat power was more than twice as strong as before he went into seclusion. Yiguchin had made ample preparations for the battlefield of Sky Prides. Oh yes, there's also this. Yiguchin seemed to have thought of something. A sparkling and resplendent sword embryo that flowed with chaotic energy emerged from his body. It was the Khanate sword embryo. It was also Yiguchin's gifted superpower as a 7th grade Sky Pride. However, at this moment, the sword embryo seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. A layer of strange light enveloped the sword embryo, as if it had an indestructible power. Yue. Yiguchin sighed deeply. When he was in seclusion in the sword tomb, Yiguchin had focused on cultivating and had not taken the initiative to sense Duguchiomo's situation. It was only after he went into seclusion that Yiguchin found out about this matter. Of course, Yiguchin could not blame Duguchiomo. After all, Duguchiomo was his demonic doppelganger. His behavior and character were not exactly the same as his. Let's put the matter of Yue aside for now. However, has this sword embryo transformed into the innate indestructible sword embryo? Yiguchin scrutinized the sword embryo. The innate indestructible sword embryo and the innate indestructible divine embryo could be merged into the innate indestructible sword embryo. This was why Gu Xiaoyang, who had obtained the sword embryo, had been pestering Yue. However, the innate indestructible sword embryo had now been obtained by Yiguchin. Of course, if it were Yiguchin, he would definitely not do anything to Yue for the sake of the innate indestructible sword embryo. It could only be said that everything was due to fate and there was no reason for it. I'll think of a way to deal with Yue in the future. Yiguchin shook his head slightly. Now that his seclusion had come to an end, continuing it would not be of much help to Yiguchin. He put on the ghost mask and walked out of the sword tomb. As soon as he walked out, he saw a girl in green with a silver sword master mask waiting for him. Master! Seeing that Yiguchin had come out of seclusion, the girl flashed to his side. It was Mu Xingzu. What's the matter? Yiguchin smiled faintly. Master, the opening of the battlefield of prodigies is near, but Xingzhu wants to go somewhere, Mu Xingzu said hesitantly. Oh, where is it? Yiguchin asked. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty, Mu Xingzu said. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Yiguchin was momentarily stunned. If Mu Xingzu had not mentioned it, he would have forgotten about it. Ever since the Battle of the Infinite Plains, Yiguchin had been stranded in the Cloud Dynasty and then came to the Sword Dynasty. He had always been in the midst of intense battles and cultivation. He had indeed forgotten that there was a group of people who always remembered him. There was also a girl who missed him. Yen Wushuang. Yiguchen murmured in his heart. The delicate and stubborn face of a girl appeared in his mind. Master, can we go to the Swallow Cloud dynasty to take a look? Mu Xingzu asked carefully. She was also a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. When she heard that the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest had moved to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, she had been thinking about it and wanted to see her senior brothers and sisters. It's not good to let them know that I'm still alive for now, Yiguchen said with a sigh. It was not that he did not trust the people of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. It was because there were too many people in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. If his identity was accidentally revealed, the consequences would be unimaginable. If the news that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui was Yiguchen got out. In less than a day, the Celestial Sword Sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, and Dongfang family would send troops to the Sword Dynasty. If the three forces attacked, even the half-step Holy King Proud Continent would find it difficult to resist. So the consequences were too serious. Yiguchen did not dare to be careless. It did not matter whether Yiguchen lived or died, but he did not want to be a burden to the Sword Dynasty. If Yiguchen really wanted to reveal his identity, he would have to at least wait until after he participated in the Prodigy battlefield and an overlord was willing to recruit him. At that time, Yiguchen's name would reappear in the world. I see. Xingzhu didn't think it through properly. Mu Xingzu lowered her head and was a little unhappy. Of course, she could understand Yiguchen. I only said that I can't reveal my identity. Did I say that I won't go to the Swallow Cloud dynasty? Yiguchen chuckled. Chapter 1197. What? Can we really go to the Swallow Cloud dynasty to see senior brother and senior sister? Mu Xingzu asked excitedly. Of course, but I have to hide my identity and I can't get in touch with them for the time being. Yiguchen said. The fewer people who knew that he was still alive, the better. After all, if Yiguchen's identity was exposed in advance, it would be a disaster for him and the Sword Dynasty. That's fine, as long as we can catch up with senior brother and senior sister. Mu Xingzu said happily. Well, get ready and let's go. Yiguchen waved his hand. In fact, he also wanted to go to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. He wanted to see his old friends from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and Sect Master Yan Changge and the others. How were they? After learning that Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu were going to leave the Sword Dynasty temporarily, Proud Divine Continent sent a false sacred expert to follow them, just in case. After all, Yiguchen had made a lot of enemies after the battle between the three dynasties. When Yiguchen heard this, he felt a little helpless and could only agree. A day later, Yiguchen, Mu Xingzu, and a new false sacred expert called Lin Tu who had just joined the Sword Dynasty drove a flying boat and left the Sword Dynasty. The South Horizon region's 100 Great Dynasties. Although they were called the 100 Great Dynasties, it was actually just a general term. Large and small dynasties were scattered all over the land of the South Horizon region. For example, the Sword Dynasty, which was ranked first, was naturally located in the central area of the South Horizon region. The weaker the dynasty, the more remote it was. For example, the Saint Origin Dynasty was just a low-level dynasty located at the edge of the South Horizon region. As for the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, it had a top honorable martial artist and was a high-level dynasty, located near the central area of the South Horizon region. However, although the Swallow Cloud Dynasty was a high-level dynasty, it was only ranked 70th or 80th among the 100 Great Dynasties. After all, it was very difficult for a dynasty without a false saint to hold the fort. Compared to the Sword Dynasty, which was the number one dynasty, the gap was like the distance between the clouds and the mud. The Sword Dynasty and Swallow Cloud Dynasty were separated by more than 10 dynasties. It would take at least 10 days to reach the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. On the 5th day, Yiguchen and the others once again flew over the sky of another empire. That empire was currently gathering its troops. Over 1 million soldiers were gathered together, and their might was boundless. Which dynasty is that? Yiguchen had nothing to do, so he asked casually. It seems to be the Phoenix Nye dynasty, said Lin Tu, the pseudo-saint expert who had come with them. Phoenix Nye dynasty. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. The Phoenix Nye dynasty was a top-tier dynasty ranked 16th among the 100 great dynasties. Its foundation was extraordinary. Yi Guqin hadn't forgotten the first time he had met the number one beauty of the Fengni dynasty, Princess Fengxi, in the Sheng Yuan dynasty's imperial capital. Although she had a hostile relationship with Yan Wushuang at first. But gradually, her relationship with Yi Guqin and the others became harmonious. Princess Fengxi even had a little ambiguous relationship with Yi Guqin. At that time, Princess Fengxi was the princess of a top-tier dynasty, while Yi Guqin was just a disciple of a low-tier dynasty. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. But now, Yi Guqin's status as a Jinkui had far surpassed Princess Fengxi's. Forget it. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly and dismissed the idea of meeting Princess Fengxi. He wasn't particularly familiar with Princess Fengxi. They could only be considered to have crossed paths. After another 5 or 6 days, Yi Guqin finally arrived at the Swallow Cloud dynasty. The Swallow Cloud dynasty didn't have a large territory, but it wasn't weak among the top-tier dynasties. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to squeeze into the top 100. But there was something that made Yi Guqin frown slightly. When he came in from the border of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, he saw that the various cities were heavily guarded. It was as if a war was about to break out. Could it be? Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness. Next, Yi Guqin drove the flying boat to the capital of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the Swallow capital. As the imperial capital of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the Swallow capital should be bustling with life and tourists. But now, the Swallow capital seemed a little desolate. There were much fewer people coming and going. This was because something big had happened recently. Empress Fengni of the Phoenix dynasty was about to lead an army to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. There were rumors that it was because Empress Fengni still had a grudge against the former prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yan Changge. At this moment, on a tall building in the imperial palace of the Swallow capital, a young girl stood by the eaves of the tall building. The wind blew over and her silky black hair fluttered. She was wearing a light blue silk skirt with a graceful figure. That pair of perfectly proportioned, round and smooth jade-like legs made the young girl even more slender and elegant, like a delicate and upright daffodil. This girl was Yan Wushuang. At this moment, she was looking into the distance with some reminiscence and confusion in her eyes. Yan Wushuang had been like this for nearly a year, often leaning against the side of the tall building. How she wished that one day, a figure would appear from the horizon and return on a 7-colored cloud. But Yan Wushuang knew that this was just wishful thinking. It's been an entire year. Yan Wushuang's exquisite face was dim and dejected. Compared to her stubbornness before, she was valiant and heroic. Yan Wushuang now looked a little haggard and weak. At this moment, a pair of jade-like arms suddenly wrapped around Yan Wushuang's slender waist. Then, a pretty face peeked out from the side. Wushuang, do you miss him again? The girl had a ponytail and was always smiling as she comforted Yan Wushuang. Who else could it be other than Ji Ling? Yan Wushuang frowned and remained silent. I believe that junior brother Yi isn't dead. One has to believe in something, right? Ji Ling comforted. Thank you, Ji Ling. Yan Wushuang forced a smile. If Ji Ling hadn't been by her side for the past year, she would have been in even more pain. Just then, a handsome young man in luxurious clothes hurriedly walked up the stairs and said, Cousin Wushuang, that prince is here again. Quickly go and greet him. If Yi Guqin was here, he would definitely recognize that the young man in luxurious clothes was Yan Xiaotang, who'd been to the sword sex forest of pagodas. He'd even gotten into a lot of unpleasantness with Yi Guqin. It's him again. That fellow who's harassing Wushuang. Why don't you tell him to scram? Ji Ling's expression immediately changed and she shouted with knitted brows. Yan Xiaotang said with a straight face, how can you say that? That prince is here to help the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Without his help, what can our Swallow Cloud dynasty use to deal with the Phoenix dynasty? So you want Wushuang to be his concubine? Ji Ling glared. What's wrong with being his concubine? He's the prince of the Great Qian dynasty. Do you know the Great Qian dynasty? It's a powerful dynasty ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. It's even more powerful than the Phoenix dynasty. When the Great Qian dynasty was mentioned, Yan Xiaotong's eyes couldn't help but reveal deep reverence and respect. That was a powerful dynasty ranked 12th. To put it bluntly, any one or two false saint experts could destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Yan Xiaotong's opinion, if the Swallow Cloud dynasty could obtain the help of the Great Qian dynasty, then the Phoenix dynasty would be nothing. What was the Phoenix Nya dynasty? Chapter 1198. After hearing Yan Xiaotong's words, Yan Wushuang and Ji Ling didn't look too good. Ji Ling especially didn't want Yan Wushuang to be that lecher's concubine. However, the name of the Great Qian dynasty was like an ancient mountain that pressed down on their hearts. The Great Qian dynasty was ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. There were more than 10 false saint experts in the dynasty, and it could be said to be extremely powerful. The Yenyun dynasty wasn't even an ant in front of the Great Qian dynasty. Even the 16th ranked Fengni dynasty wasn't willing to openly go against the Great Qian dynasty. Cousin, think about it carefully. It's the Great Qian dynasty. Yan Xiaotang was still trying to persuade her. Previously, he also had some thoughts about Yan Wushuang, but he completely cut it off later because he knew that Yan Wushuang didn't like him at all. Now that the Yenyun dynasty was in danger, only Yan Wushuang could save the entire dynasty. Yan Xiaotang took the initiative to step forward and wanted to matchmake this matter. Are you still Wushuang's cousin? Why aren't you thinking about her at all? Don't you know what kind of person the Great Qian prince is? Ji Ling was so angry that her face turned red. The 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty was dissolute and promiscuous. He had more than 100 concubines. Would Yan Wushuang be happy to marry such a vile prince as his concubine? Yan Xiaotang pulled a long face and said to Yan Wushuang, "Are you still thinking about Yiguchen?" Yan Wushuang lowered her head and remained silent. Yan Xiaotang shook his head and said, "Cousin Wushuang, look on the bright side. Yiguchen is already dead. It's all in the past. The dead can't come back to life." Yan Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands tightly and a trace of pain appeared on her exquisite face. Yan Xiaotang didn't care at all and continued, "Even if Yiguchen is still alive, so what? Can he save the Yenyun dynasty and help us deal with the Fengni dynasty? No. That's why we have to look on the bright side. I think the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty is quite sincere." "Enough, shut up," Ji Ling reprimanded. She couldn't listen to it anymore. "Sai, no matter what, you should at least go and take a look. Grandfather Emperor and the others are also receiving them." Yan Xiaotang shook his head and said, "Grandpa Emperor." Yan Wushuang seemed to be struggling. The imperial grandfather they were referring to was the retired emperor of the Yenyun dynasty. He was also the strongest person in the Yenyun dynasty, a top honorable one. "All right, I'll go," Yan Wushuang said coldly. "Shuang, Ji Ling bit her lips until they turned white. "Ha! That's more like it." Yan Xiaotang heaved a sigh of relief. If Yan Wushuang agreed, then all the difficulties would be easily solved. At this moment, in a dazzling reception hall, a young man dressed in a lavender robe was sitting leisurely on a wooden armchair. Beside him stood several attendants. If Yiguchen were here, he would definitely be surprised. It was because the man in the lavender robe was none other than Yang Haoye, the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty whom he had met in the ancient Chaos Wasteland during his first mission at Sacred Cliff College. At that time, Yang Haoye, Su Jiqing, and the others were besieged by the death worms, and Yiguchen was the one who helped them out. Later on, Yang Haoye had bad intentions, and Yiguchen took out the Sword Sun token, which almost scared Yang Haoye out of his wits. However, at this moment, Yang Haoya's attitude was frivolous, and the corners of his mouth curled up arrogantly as if he was superior to others. There was a group of people standing at the side, led by a yellow-haired old man. He was the retired emperor of the Yenyun dynasty and the grandfather of Yen Wushuang and the others, Yen He. Behind him was Yen Wushuang's father, the former master of the sword sect pagoda forest, Yen Changge. Yen Xiaotang's father, the prince of the Yenyun dynasty, Yen Bailan, was also there. In addition, Yen Feiling, who had been to the sword sect pagoda forest, was also in the group. It could be said that most of the important people in the Yenyun dynasty were gathered there. Princess Wushuang hasn't arrived yet. Yang Haoya's tone was slightly impatient. Eighth prince, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but she should be here soon, Yen He said warmly. He was the retired emperor of a country, but at this moment, he had to bow down. It was because Yang Haoya was the prince of the great Qian dynasty. He casually called a few servants, and they were all top supremacies who could compete with Yen He. Not to mention that there were more than 10 false saints in the great Qian dynasty. Such a status was not something that the Yenyun dynasty could provoke. Moreover, the crisis of the Fengni dynasty was approaching, and only with the help of the great Qian dynasty could the Yenyun dynasty tide over this crisis. Not long after, 3 figures walked in from outside the guest hall. It was Yen Wushuang, Ji Ling, and Yen Xiaotang. When he saw Yen Wushuang, Yang Haoya's eyes lit up. Yen Wushuang's face was exquisite, and her figure was curvy. In particular, her beautiful snow-white long legs were even more eye-catching. TSK. How enjoyable would it be to have those long legs wrapped around my waist? Yang Haoya thought to himself, and his eyes could not help but reveal a lustful look. He liked women, and previously wanted to subdue Su Jiqing in the ancient Chaos Wasteland. In the end, Su Jiqing went with Yi Guqin. Later on, Yang Haoya accidentally saw Yen Wushuang, who was participating in the training in a secret realm. He was immediately attracted to her. After learning that the Fengni dynasty was about to attack the Yenyun dynasty, Yang Haoya directly came to the Yenyun dynasty, wanting to take Yen Wushuang as a concubine. Yen Wushuang saw the lustful look in Yang Haoya's eyes and frowned slightly. She forcefully suppressed the disgust in her heart and bowed slightly. Wushuang greets the 8th prince. Ha, Princess Wushuang, we'll be a family in the future, no need to be so formal, Yang Haoya said with a laugh. Yen Wushuang frowned and said, Wushuang doesn't know what the 8th prince means. Oh, you mean, you're not willing to be this prince's concubine? Yang Haoya's smile faded, and his tone was slightly cold. The follower by the side berated loudly, how dare you, a mere princess of a small country, it's your honor to be fancied by His Highness, and you actually dare to refuse. The reprimand of the follower made the faces of Yen He and the rest turn ugly. No matter what, Yen Wushuang was still the princess of a country. How could she be reprimanded by a follower of Yang Haoya? Yen Changge took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. His current cultivation base had also reached the 6th heaven of Venerable Realm. Even so, it was still nothing in front of the great Qian dynasty. Yang Haoya crossed his legs and said indifferently, I also know the situation of your Yenyun dynasty, and I specially came to help you. As long as Princess Wushuang is willing to marry me, I'll settle the matter of the Fengni dynasty for you. Yang Haoya waved his hand, appearing rather domineering. The eyes of Yen Bailan, Yen Xiaotang, Yen Feiling, and the rest all lit up. They definitely did not want the Yenyun dynasty to be destroyed. If that happened, they would not have a good ending. The price of obtaining the help of the great Qian dynasty was only to let Yen Wushuang marry over as a concubine. In their opinion, this kind of transaction was too worth it. Even the Grand Emperor Yen He's old face revealed hesitation. Logically speaking, he definitely did not want his granddaughter to suffer. However, compared to the entire Yenyun dynasty, Yen Wushuang's happiness was insignificant. Chapter 1199. Many members of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's imperial family turned to look at Yen Wushuang. Their eyes were filled with hope and eagerness. The only way now was for Yan Wushuang to agree to Yang Haoya's request. Only Yan Chang'e, Ji Ling, and the others had tense expressions. They couldn't bear it. The entire Swallow Cloud dynasty had to sacrifice a girl's happiness to save it. It was a little sad. But this was how the world worked. The strong were respected. With strength and background, one could do whatever they wanted. Yang Haoya looked at Yan Wushuang playfully. With his status, he could use forceful methods to force Yan Wushuang. But that would be too boring. Yang Haoya loved to see those women submit to his humiliation even though they didn't want to. Yan Wushuang clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. An extremely conflicted expression appeared on her face. After Yi Guqin, she hadn't met another man who could move her heart. But her father, grandfather, and everyone from the Sword sect were all in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. If the Swallow Cloud dynasty was destroyed, these people would also die. Yan Wushuang definitely didn't want to see that. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell as she said with difficulty, "Can you give me 3 days to consider?" Yan Wushuang couldn't make a decision now. Yang Haoya frowned, but soon relaxed. "All right, I'm not a stingy person. It's only 3 days. I can wait." But Yang Haoya changed the topic and continued, "It's hard to say when the Phoenix Nye dynasty will attack." What he meant was that if Yan Wushuang kept delaying, it would be too late when the Phoenix Nye dynasty attacked. Hearing this, Yan Xiaotang and the others' expressions changed. They felt uneasy. After that, Yang Haoya and his entourage left. The atmosphere in the guest hall was oppressive and dead silent. "Wushuang, it's all my fault." Yan Chang'e's face was filled with pain. The reason the Phoenix Nye dynasty started the war was because of Empress Feng Nye. She had always hated Yan Chang'e for abandoning her for an ordinary girl. After Yan Chang'e and the others returned to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Empress Feng Nye's hidden hatred was once again aroused. That was why she decided to attack the Swallow Cloud dynasty. "Father, there's no need to say any more. This has nothing to do with you." Yan Wushuang forced a smile. "Shuang, our Swallow Cloud dynasty is too weak. That's why we have to rely on you." Yan He's old face was filled with shame. Yan Bailin continued, "Niece, you must be more open-minded. The survival of the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty depends on your choice. The life and death of a dynasty rested on the happiness of a young girl." How absurd was that? "Shuang knows. Let me be alone for a while." Yan Wushuang turned around and left. Her back view was somewhat desolate. "Shuang, Ji Ling's eyes reddened. Who knew how much Yan Wushuang had endured? Just as the entire Swallow Cloud imperial family was in a gloomy mood. Yi Guqin, Mu Xingzu, and Lin Tu finally arrived at Yan capital on a flying boat. They landed outside Yendu. Yi Guqin put on a devil mask, a black cloak, and a hood. Mu Xingzu also put on a silver mask. Lin Tu quietly followed beside them. After entering Yendu, Yi Guqin and Mu Xingzu didn't immediately go to the palace. Instead, they found a restaurant. They had also heard that Fengni dynasty was going to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. So that's how it is. Yi Guqin finally understood. He had passed by Fengni dynasty before and saw that they had mobilized 1 million troops. He didn't expect them to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. "Thank goodness we came. Otherwise, senior sister and the others would be in danger." Mu Xingzu patted her small chest, still a little scared. Yi Guqin also sighed. Fortunately, he had listened to Mu Xingzu's words and came to Swallow Cloud dynasty. Otherwise, the next time he came, Swallow Cloud dynasty would have been a pile of ruins. At this moment, someone at the side table whispered, "I wonder if Princess Wushuang will marry the 8th prince this time." Probably. After all, Swallow Cloud dynasty can only survive by relying on Great Qian dynasty. Sigh, it's a pity that Princess Wushuang has to marry such a person. Someone sighed, feeling pity for Yan Wushuang. The 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty. Ye Guqin frowned under the devil mask. If he remembered correctly, the 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty was Yang Haoye, whom he had met during a mission in ancient Chaos Wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to target Yan Wushuang. This made Ye Guqin's face turn cold. He's too much. How dare he force senior sister? How despicable. Mu Xingzu was also furious. Yang Haoye was obviously using Fengni dynasty to force Yan Wushuang to marry him. This made Mu Xingzu extremely disgusted. However, at this moment, a group of people walked up to the restaurant. Everyone in the restaurant looked over and was immediately stunned. They hurriedly shut their mouths with shock in their eyes. The person in the lead was Yang Haoye, who was dressed in a light purple robe. He was followed by his entourage. Yang Haoye and the others took their seats. Seeing this, the rest of the people around them hurriedly got up and walked downstairs, not daring to stay beside Yang Haoye for a second. Only Ye Guqin and the other two remained seated calmly. Yang Haoye didn't notice Ye Guqin and the others as he took a sip of wine alone. One of the entourage at the side sucked up to him and said, "Yan Wushuang is really insensible. It should be her honor that your highness wants to take her as a concubine." She actually declined. Yang Haoye swirled the wine in his glass and sneered, "It's normal. She wants to pretend to be a chaste woman. I've seen many women like her, but in the end, didn't they still obediently submit to me?" Hearing these words, Ye Guqin, who was seated in the corner, gradually had a cold gaze in his eyes. A trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. The entourage continued to ask, "Your Highness, what if Yan Wushuang still refuses after 3 days? If she still refuses, heh." Yang Haoye's face was cold. "Then there's no need for the Fengni dynasty to do anything. I'll destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty first and slaughter her family and friends in front of her. Let's see if she surrenders or not." "Your Highness, you're so cunning." The entourage flattered. "Ha, of course, this is my last resort." Yang Haoye smiled casually. But at this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded. "Don't you think your thoughts are too vicious?" Yang Haoye raised his eyebrows. Only then did he notice the 3 figures in the corner. He vaguely felt that he had heard this voice somewhere before, but after thinking carefully, he couldn't figure it out. Shaking his head slightly, Yang Haoye said coldly, "You're really unlucky to run into me when I'm in a bad mood." Yang Haoye held his wine glass and said coldly. The followers immediately understood and unleashed their auras. They were all Martial Highness realm experts. "How dare you displease His Highness, you lowly commoners are courting death." The followers of the Venerables shouted coldly and attacked Ye Guqin and the others together. Yang Haoye didn't pay attention to them at all and drank alone. At this moment, Lin Tu, who was sitting beside Ye Guqin, raised his hand with a cold expression. Puff! 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 The entourage of the venerable experts directly exploded and turned into blood flowers. The sputtering blood sprayed all over Yang Haoye and the wine in his glass turned blood red. Yang Haoye was stunned. His blood-stained face froze and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle. Even his breathing seemed to have stopped. Chapter 1200. Yang Haoye's body was stained with warm blood. His face instantly froze, and his hands trembled. The wine glasses in his hands slipped to the ground, shattering into pieces. You. Yang Haoye's body trembled, and his face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. To be able to kill several sovereigns with one slap, that person's strength was absolutely unfathomable. Ye Guqin indifferently stood up and walked towards Yang Haoye. Who are you? I'm the 8th prince of the Great Qian Empire, Yang Haoye. Yang Haoye's legs went soft, and he collapsed to the ground with a plop. He kept moving backwards. It wasn't that he didn't dare to resist, but he knew that with the person's strength, he couldn't resist. His cultivation was only at the divine dwelling stage, and he wasn't even a sovereign. There was no way he could escape. Therefore, Yang Haoye could only bring out his identity and background, hoping to make the other party afraid. You really don't change. Yi Guqin sneered. Yang Haoye had provoked him in the ancient chaos wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to bump into the muzzle of his gun again. You know me. Yang Haoye suddenly reacted, and then he seemed to remember something when he heard Yi Guqin's voice. Yi Guqin raised his head slightly, revealing the ghost mask under his hood. When he saw the mask, Yang Haoye's face tightened, and then he sucked in a breath as if he suddenly remembered something. He couldn't help but speak in a trembling voice. You are the Sword Dynasty's. Dugu. That's right, I didn't expect to bump into you again after letting you go last time. What a coincidence. Yi Guqin smiled faintly. But that smile was very cold. Yang Haoye's heart sank to the bottom. Given the Great Qian Empire's information channels, how could they not know what had happened in the Sword Dynasty? Including the fact that Yi Guqin had become the new Jinkui. However, Yang Haoye could not understand why the high and mighty Sword Dynasty's Jinkui would appear in a small place like the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Dugu Bai. No. Lord Jinkui, please spare me this time, I'll leave immediately. Yang Haoye was not a fool. He knew that Yi Guqin might have some sort of relationship with the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, so he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Yang Haoye, who had been incomparably arrogant in Swallow Cloud Imperial Palace, was now kowtowing non-stop in fear. If Yan He and the other members of the Swallow Cloud Imperial family saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked. However, compared to the identity of Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty, Yang Haoye's identity as the 8th prince of the Great Qian Dynasty was really nothing. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with coldness. The last time he held back, he allowed Yang Haoye to almost harm Yan Wushuang. This time, he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake. Sensing the murderous intent in Yi Guqin's voice, Yang Haoye shouted in fear, You can't kill me. I'm a prince of the Great Qian Dynasty. If you kill me, my father, the Great Qian Emperor, will not let you off. It's useless to use anyone as a shield. Yi Guqin raised his hand and his true energy surged out. He used his fingers as a sword, pointing one to the sky and the other to the ground. Then, he clasped his hands together and a terrifying golden sword aura was brewing in his palms. Then, he swept out with his finger. A golden sword light that was 100 feet long lit up the sky. The incomparably ferocious golden sword radiance swept towards Yang Haoye. No! Yang Haoye only had time to say one word before his body was annihilated by the golden sword light, exploding into a cloud of blood and dust. That golden sword ray was simply too powerful. It was so powerful that it split the entire restaurant in two. The golden light shone and the entire Swallow capital could see it clearly. What's that? Such a phenomenon shook the imperial palace. Yan Wushuang leaned against the tall building alone and her heart was in knots. At this moment, she also saw the dazzling golden sword ray cut through the dark clouds in the sky. That's... Yan Wushuang was stunned. She did not know why, but when she saw the golden sword light, she actually had a special feeling of palpitation. Without any hesitation, Yan Wushuang moved her slender legs and her delicate body flashed out. Many people in the imperial palace were also alarmed and hurried to the scene of the incident. After killing Yang Haoye in the restaurant, Yi Guqin's expression did not change at all. It was just a prince. It was not a big deal to kill him. Moreover, he did deserve to be killed. The commotion is a little too big. Xingzhu, I'll leave for a while, Yi Guqin said. Mu Xingzhu nodded slightly. Then, Lin Tu and Yi Guqin flashed out while Mu Xingzhu stayed where she was. This was because she wanted to meet her senior brothers and sisters in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After a while, the sound of wind whistling could be heard. It was some guards of the imperial palace. Among them, there were even a few familiar figures. Chu Qingqi, who was dressed in green, and Yi Xia were all senior disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After coming to the Yenyun dynasty, they joined the royal family. Those are the corpses of the great Qian dynasty prince's followers. Chu Qingqi was shocked when he saw some broken limbs on the ground. Who killed them? Yi Xia's expression changed. The 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty had died in the capital of the Yenyun dynasty. If word got out, the Yenyun dynasty would never be able to clear their name. At this moment, they finally noticed the petite girl who was wearing a silver mask. You are. Chu Qingqi's expression froze. At this moment, Yan Xiaotang, Ji Ling, and Yan Wushuang also arrived. Seeing the scene in front of him, Yan Xiaotang's heart skipped a beat and he almost fainted. The 8th prince is dead. Ji Ling was also stunned, but there was a trace of joy in her eyes. Yan Wushuang's pupils also trembled. She knew very well what the 8th prince's death meant. The 8th prince's death seems to be related to this person. Chu Qingqi pointed at the masked figure. You are. Yan Wushuang also looked over. Hee, senior sister, long time no see. That person took off the mask on her face, revealing a fair and pretty face. Her eyebrows were curved, and her big eyes were twinkling with a smile. You are. Junior sister Mu. Yan Wushuang was stunned. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the others were also stunned, then joy appeared on their faces. They did not expect to meet an old friend again. Next, they exchanged greetings and sighed. Ji Ling tactfully told Mu Xingzu what happened to Yi Guqin in the Tianhuang Plains, but Mu Xingzu did not know. Mu Xingzu rolled her eyes and giggled, but she did not say anything. Yan Xiaotang interrupted with a pale face, why are you still reminiscing at this time? This girl is very likely related to the 8th prince's death. Ji Ling asked, Junior sister Mu, did you really kill the 8th prince? Mu Xingzu rolled her eyes and said, a friend of Xingzhu's killed him. He couldn't stand Yang Halia's character, so he killed him directly. What, a friend? Yan Wushuang and the others were shocked. What kind of friend did Mu Xingzu make that he dared to kill the 8th prince of Great Qian so casually? Chapter 1201. You will know in the future. Mu Xingzu said casually. She also knew that the news that Yi Guqin was still alive could not be leaked out. Otherwise, Yi Guqin and the Sword Dynasty would be pressured by the 3 overlord forces. Where is your friend? Ask him to come out. The Yenyun dynasty can't bear the death of the 8th prince. Yan Xiaotang said coldly with an ugly expression. If the matter was not resolved, the emperor of the Great Qian dynasty would definitely vent his anger on the Yenyun dynasty. By then, it would be the other 2 top dynasties that would attack the Yenyun dynasty. Isn't it just the Great Qian dynasty? What can happen? Mu Xingzu pursed her lips and did not take it seriously. Perhaps it was because she had become the sword son of the Sword dynasty, Mu Xingzu's horizons had also been broadened. The Great Qian dynasty was not enough to scare her. Yan Xiaotang was so angry that he laughed. The Great Qian dynasty is nothing. How can you say that? Your friend killed the 8th prince and now he doesn't dare to come out. Do you want the Yenyun dynasty to take the blame? Enough, cousin, shut up. Yan Wushuang reprimanded. Those who did not know would think that Yan Xiaotang was from the Great Qian dynasty. Cousin Wushuang, what do you know? The Yenyun dynasty is completely destroyed because of her and her friend. Yan Xiaotang swung his sleeves and left angrily. In his opinion, it would not be long before the entire Yenyun dynasty was destroyed. I'm sorry, junior sister Mu, Yan Wushuang said apologetically. It's okay, senior brothers and senior sisters, let's find a place to talk. Mu Xingzu looked relaxed and happy. Looking at Mu Xingzu's expression, Chu Qingqi and the rest fell into deep thought. Did Mu Xingzu really have someone to rely on? As for Mu Xingzu's sword sun mask, Because there were many cultivators who wore masks, and with the Swallow Cloud dynasty's level, it was difficult for them to come into contact with the Sword dynasty, so they did not recognize Mu Xingzu's mask. After that, Mu Xingzu, Yan Wushuang, and the others also left the collapsed restaurant. On the roof of another building, Yi Guqin stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Beneath his mask, his gaze was fixed on Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others. Everyone, now is not the time to meet you. After the battle of heaven's favorites, I will drink with you, Yi Guqin murmured. On the other side, Yan Wushuang seemed to have sensed something, and she suddenly turned around and looked into the distance. But there was nothing there. Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly as a self-mocking smile appeared on her face. It had been a year, and her misconceptions had increased. She always felt that the young man would come back to find her. However, it was just disappointment after disappointment. Soon, the news of the death of the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty spread throughout the entire Yan capital. When Grand Emperor Yan heard the news, he almost fainted from anger. Yan Beilin even wanted to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Changge vehemently opposed it. After all, Mu Xingzu was once a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda, and he was the sect master of the Sword Sect Pagoda. He had no reason not to protect Mu Xingzu's safety. Then, a few days later, another piece of bad news came. The million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty had been reorganized. Empress Fengni personally led an expedition to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At the same time, in the palace of the Great Qian dynasty, an earth-shattering roar was heard. A middle-aged man in a dragon python imperial robe had an extremely cold expression. He clapped his hand, and the dragon chair he was sitting on silently turned to dust. This middle-aged man was the Great Qian dynasty's Emperor Qian, a powerful false saint expert. Little Eighth died in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Emperor Qian asked in a gloomy tone. That's right, the servant below said. Did the Swallow Cloud dynasty not give an explanation? Emperor Qian asked coldly. No, they didn't search for the person who killed His Highness. They didn't find anything either. Well, how dare a puny Swallow Cloud dynasty look down on the Great Qian dynasty? Emperor Qian was so angry that he laughed, his voice shaking the entire palace. Where are the 4 directions heavenly guards? Your subordinate is here. 4 strong false divine breaths burst out. Like fire beacons, 4 figures in iron armor appeared. Come with me and destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Emperor Qian's voice boomed like thunder. He stepped into the sky with great momentum. Emperor Qian's action wasn't because Yang Haoye was important to him. After all, he had too many children, and Yang Haoye wasn't that outstanding. Emperor Qian was angry because of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's disrespect to the Great Qian dynasty. Emperor Qian and the 4 heavenly guards, a total of 5 false saints, set out together. In addition, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers with them, ready to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Emperor Qian's opinion, destroying a high-tier dynasty was as easy as eating and drinking. Once he destroyed the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty would naturally fall. At the same time, millions of soldiers formed a mighty flood of steel from the Phoenix Nye dynasty's direction and headed toward the Swallow Cloud dynasty. A phoenix chariot rose high into the sky, and inside it sat a peerlessly beautiful figure. It was Empress Feng Nye, who was preparing to personally lead the troops. Suddenly, a fiery red figure blocked in front of the carriage. That was a young lady of outstanding beauty. She wore a red muslin dress, and her face was tender and charming. The flame-like phoenix mark on her forehead gave her a sense of mystery and nobility. If Yi Guqin was here, he would definitely recognize this girl. It was Princess Fengxi. Mother, do you really want to do this? Princess Fengxi bit her red lips. Fengxi, what are you doing? Empress Feng Nye frowned. Her facial features were charming and she exuded a sense of majesty. Empress Feng Nye was also a powerful false saint expert. Mother, let bygones be bygones. There's no need to keep harping on it, Princess Fengxi persuaded. Empress Feng Nye sneered, he made me lose face back then, and I can't take it lying down. It's fine if he hides like a mouse, but since he dares to return to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, he must be prepared to pay the price. But mother, you've already forced that woman to her death. We're even now, Princess Fengxi said. Move aside. I will personally destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty and make that heartless Yen Chang'e regret rejecting me back then. Empress Feng Nye barked. An aura exploded and pushed Princess Fengxi away. The army then pointed their swords at the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Mother. Princess Fengxi murmured. Originally, she was filled with hostility toward Yen Chang'e and Yen Wushuang like Empress Feng Nye. But after going to the Saint Origin dynasty and interacting with Yi Guqin, Yen Wushuang, and the others, her hostility had unknowingly dissipated. This was why Princess Fengxi wanted to persuade Empress Feng Nye. However, Empress Feng Nye was still too stubborn. When a woman was stubborn, she could be even crazier than a man. Sigh. Princess Fengxi sighed deeply and also got on a carriage to follow. As the news of the Great Gan dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty's army spread, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty was in chaos. The Swallow capital was also in a state of panic. Yen He, Yen Chang'e, Yen Bailin, and the others had heavy expressions. Even Yen Xiaotang and the others were prepared to flee. After all, who could stop two top-tier dynasties? At the very least, the Swallow Cloud dynasty wouldn't be able to. At this critical moment, the Swallow Cloud dynasty was about to collapse. Yi Guqin clasped his hands behind his back and stood on top of a pavilion. Two top-tier dynasties attacking together. They really think highly of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yi Guqin sneered. Lin Tu frowned slightly. Jinkui, the Great Gan Emperor and Empress Feng Nye are both very strong false saints. I'm afraid I won't be able to deal with them alone. Although Lin Tu was a false saint, his strength wasn't at the top. Not to mention that the Great Gan Emperor and Empress Feng Nye wouldn't be the only two false saints. Just the Great Gan dynasty alone had 5 false saints, including the Great Gan Emperor. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and took out a communication jade. Brother Leng, isn't it a bit boring staying in the Sword dynasty? Do you want to come out for a walk? The corner of Lin Tu's eyes twitched when he heard Yi Guqin's message. In the entire Sword dynasty, Yi Guqin was probably the only one who could invite the solitary Cloud Sword Saint. TSK, these two dynasties are going to be in big trouble. Lin Tu shook his head and smiled. Chapter 1202. With the Qian Emperor and Empress Feng Nye personally leading the expedition, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty fell into unprecedented chaos. It even attracted the attention of the surrounding dynasties. To the outside world, the Swallow Cloud dynasty would definitely not be able to escape this time. The strength of the two sides was not equal at all. As time passed, the armies of the two top dynasties entered the Swallow Cloud dynasty's territory without any obstructions, heading straight for the Swallow capital. At this moment, on the city walls of the Swallow capital, Grand Emperor Yen He, Yen Chang'e, Yen Bailin, Yen Xiaotang, and Yen Wushuang were all there. Elder Qing He, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the others from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were also there. Mu Xingzu was also standing beside Yen Wushuang. Aside from Mu Xingzhu, who had a relaxed expression on her face, the rest of the people looked extremely solemn. It's over. I'm really done for this time. Yen Xiaotang's face was as pale as paper. It wasn't that he didn't want to escape, but no egg would remain intact when the nest was overturned. Even if he escaped, he wouldn't be able to escape anywhere. He would either die or be enslaved in the end. Yen Wushuang took a deep breath as her beautiful chest heaved up and down. She said to Yen He, royal grandfather, the great Qian dynasty's matter is ultimately because of Shuang-er. Shuang-er is willing to use her life to appease the Qian emperor's anger. Yen Wushuang didn't ask Mu Xingzu or her friend to take the blame. Instead, she was willing to take the blame herself. That's impossible. He shook his head. How could he possibly send his granddaughter to her death? Let me go. Empress Feng Nye personally led the expedition just to target me and make me regret. Yan Chang's face was filled with vicissitudes as he sighed. In the end, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's calamity was caused by him. Looking at Yan Chang'e and Yan Wushuang, the father and daughter, offered themselves to him. He clenched his shriveled hands tightly. He felt resentment, powerlessness, and more than anything else, unwillingness. Because the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a small country, they couldn't resist at all and could only be swallowed by the top dynasties. No need to say any more. No matter what happens, we'll just have to deal with it. At most, we'll just die. He had gotten over it. Since the end result was the same, why not be more carefree? Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others were pale. They definitely did not want to die. Mu Xingzu said, "Don't worry, the Swallow Cloud dynasty will be fine this time." With the protection of the Sword dynasty's Jinkui Yiguchen, nothing could happen to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. When Yan Xiaotang heard this, he could not bear to listen any longer. With reddened eyes, he shouted, "You still dare to say that? If it wasn't for your friend who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian, would our Swallow Cloud Empire be forced into such a situation? He's just a prince with a bad character, and he even wanted to covet senior sister Yan. So what if I killed him?" Mu Xingzu shrugged her shoulders with a look of indifference. What shameless boasting. Yan Xiaotang's face was ashen, and he didn't say anything else. Then, the atmosphere became so oppressive that it was suffocating. Right at this moment, a dark mass of people appeared in the distance. It was as if they had drowned the horizon. He's here. Everyone from the royal family of Swallow Cloud was on high alert. In the distant horizon, a mighty army was rushing over with a majestic aura that shook the heavens. The whole world seemed to be shrouded in an austere atmosphere of golden spears and armored horses. The dark mass of the army came from 2 different directions. One side had a large number of people, about 1 million. It was the million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty. The other side only had a few 100,000 people, but their aura was also shocking and carried with it a conquering battle intent. Of course, the army was not the most important. The most important thing was that there were top experts. Above the army of the Fengni dynasty, a phoenix carriage crossed the void. Although the person did not appear, the powerful aura had already covered the entire Swallow capital. There was no need to say much about who was sitting in the phoenix carriage. In addition, there were 2 false saints from the Fengni dynasty. On the other side, above the army of the Great Qian dynasty, Emperor Qian and his 4 heavenly guards stood on a golden dragon boat. They were like the sun in the sky, and their aura shook the world. Is that the power of a false saint? On the Swallow Cloud Empire's side, panic and despair rose in their hearts. He seemed to have aged more than 10 years in an instant, and his old face was filled with sorrow. There were 5 false saints from the Great Qian dynasty and 3 from the Fengni dynasty. A total of 8 false saints had arrived, and their aura shook the world. The entire Yan capital was like a piece of paper in front of the 8 false saints. It could be said that among the people on the city wall, only Mu Xingzu's expression did not change at all. Because she had seen even more soul-stirring scenes. In the previous battle of the Sword dynasty, even 3 heavenly tribulation saints had appeared. In comparison, the current situation seemed like a piece of cake. Swallow Cloud Empire, how dare you! Emperor Qian roared, and his voice was loud and clear, spreading across heaven and earth. Please forgive us, Emperor Qian. He bowed. Seeing this, Yan Wushuang bit her lips and stepped forward. Emperor Qian, it's all because of me. I'm willing to repay Yang Haoye's life with my own. Emperor Qian said coldly, do you think you're worthy? I want the entire Swallow Cloud Empire to die with my son. Emperor Qian's words made everyone in the Swallow capital turn pale. Not only that, Empress Fengni of the Fengni dynasty walked out of her phoenix carriage. Her phoenix-like eyes immediately locked onto Yan Chang'e. Yan Chang'e's eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and his expression was complicated. Yan Wushuang's eyes, however, revealed a trace of hatred. It was this Empress Fengni who had forced her mother to death. Although Yan Wushuang had never seen her birth mother, it didn't mean that she didn't hate her. Yan Chang'e, I'll ask you now. Do you regret marrying that woman? Empress Fengni asked, her voice as cold as ice. Yan Chang'e sighed deeply and looked at Yan Wushuang. The corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows resembled her mother's. She was a woman of ordinary birth, but had a tenacious personality and was dedicated to love. Yan Chang'e's lips curled into a happy smile as he looked at Empress Fengni. I'm sorry for what happened back then, but I, Yan Chang'e, have no regrets. Boom! Empress Fengni's aura exploded as Yan Chang'e spoke. She was furious. Alright, since that's the case, I'll let you meet that bitch. Listen up, soldiers of Fengni, kill. Empress Fengni waved her jade-like arm. The million-strong army charged forward with great momentum. Mother! Princess Fengxi bit her lip, unable to bear it. On the other side, Emperor Qian also said indifferently, there's no need for the Swallow Cloud Empire to exist anymore. Today, we'll destroy it. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the great Qian dynasty advanced toward the Swallow capital. Emperor Qian, Empress Fengni, and the other false saints moved, wanting to kill the Swallow Cloud Empire's imperial family. Seeing this scene, everyone on the city walls had bitter expressions on their faces, feeling helpless in their hearts. They didn't even need to resist because they didn't even have the strength to do so. However, just as the false saints and the million-strong army were about to raze the Swallow capital to the ground, the sonorous sound of a zither suddenly rang out. Chapter 1203. The sound of the zither pierced through metal and stone like a heavenly sword piercing through the heavens. All of the millions of soldiers who didn't have a high cultivation base immediately felt a headache when they heard the sound of the zither. Their movements slowed down. Who is it? Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian sensed it at the same time and stopped in their tracks. Could there be another expert in Swallow capital? It wasn't just Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian. Even Yan He, Yan Wushuang, and the others were shocked. Someone was playing the zither at such a critical moment. Only Mu Xingzu's eyes lit up when she heard the sonorous sound of the zither. She thought to herself, is Master finally making a move? A figure was sitting cross-legged in the sky. The figure was wearing a black cloak and was sitting cross-legged. A zither was placed in front of him. At that moment, the figure was playing the zither with his hands. A terrifying sword concept surrounded him, and it resonated with the sound of the zither. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked. That was because this scene was truly unexpected. The Swallow capital was on the brink of destruction. Millions of soldiers surrounded the Swallow capital. 8 false saints wanted to raze the Swallow capital to the ground. At such a critical moment, someone was sitting cross-legged in the sky and playing the zither. A million soldiers were in front of him, but his expression did not change. What kind of heroic spirit was this? Who is that? Yan Feiling covered her mouth, her face full of astonishment. Could it be the person who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian? Yan Xiaotang thought about it and exclaimed. That was the only explanation that made sense. That is, for some reason, Yan Wushuang felt an inexplicable throbbing in her heart when she saw that figure. It was as if her heartstrings were being tugged. Is that your friend? Ji Ling asked Mu Xingzu curiously. Mu Xingzu smiled and nodded. Even Yan He and the others were shocked. However, Yan He's eyes dimmed when he sensed the fluctuation of the figure's cultivation. The figure sitting cross-legged in the 9th heaven playing the zither was none other than Yi Guqian. It was impossible for him to watch the Swallow Cloud Empire be destroyed by the 2 top empires. That was why he intervened. At this moment, Yiguchin was playing the guqin, infusing his sword will into the music, shaking the spiritual sea and divine soul of the million-strong army. The song Yiguchin played was a famous song from his previous life, Ode to the Chivalrous Man. The sound of the zither was like a sword, sonorous and resonating. It was as if a chivalrous hero had broken the world with his sword. Empress Feng Nie frowned and coldly shouted, "Who are you?" Not far away, Princess Fengxi also stared at Yiguchin in astonishment. To think that someone would dare to stand in front of Yan Du at such a critical juncture. How much courage did that require? The Qian Emperor swept his gaze across. When he sensed that Yiguchin's cultivation wasn't high and hadn't even reached the honorable realm, he couldn't help but sneer. A person with a low cultivation and deliberately mystifying tricks dares to block the great Qian dynasty's army? What a joke! As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, his pseudo-saint aura burst out and pressed down on Yiguchin with one hand. Not good. Seeing this scene, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others' faces changed. However, Yiguchin didn't seem to notice the Qian Emperor's attack and continued playing the zither. He seemed to have entered some kind of epiphany, and the sound of the zither became even more majestic. Deliberately mystifying tricks, die. Emperor Qian pressed down with one hand, as if he was swatting a fly. He wanted to kill Yiguchin. At this moment, a figure soared into the sky from Yan Du and collided with Emperor Qian's move. Terrifying real qi ripples burst out like a sudden clap of thunder. A pseudo-saint expert? Emperor Qian was surprised. Yan He and the others from the Swallow Cloud imperial family were also stunned. Since when did a pseudo-saint expert arrive in Yendu? The appearance of a pseudo-saint expert shocked everyone. Even Empress Feng Nie was surprised. Pseudo-saint experts weren't cabbages that could be found on the streets. As long as a dynasty had a pseudo-saint expert, it could become a top dynasty. From this, one could see how rare and powerful they were. This pseudo-saint expert was naturally Lin Tu, who had followed Yiguchin to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At this moment, he said coldly, "If anyone dares to interfere, don't blame me for being merciless." Lin Tu stood beside Yiguchin like a servant. This made Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nie even more shocked. Why did a pseudo-saint expert feel like a servant? On the city walls of Yendu, Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others widened their eyes and gasped in disbelief. That mysterious person actually had a pseudo-saint expert as a servant? Your friend, where did he come from? Yan Xiaotang stammered as he asked Mu Xingzu with lingering fear. Back then, he had wanted to capture him and bring him to the great Qian dynasty as punishment. Now that he thought about it, he was covered in cold sweat. You'll know soon. Mu Xingzu couldn't be bothered to say anything more to a spineless person like Yan Xiaotang. Ji Ling's eyes lit up. How generous. To have a pseudo-saint expert as a servant, his background must be extraordinary. Yan Wushuang's gaze never left that figure from the beginning until the end. She had a vague intuition, but she didn't dare to believe it. She was afraid that it was all just an illusion. At this moment, Yiguchin didn't care about anything else. Because he had touched upon an opportunity to gain enlightenment. The sound of the zither was sonorous and impassioned, like a swordsman from ancient times who traveled to the ends of the world with his sword. At the same time, a mysterious sword intent was released from the zither. The million soldiers suddenly realized that the swords in their scabbards were trembling involuntarily, as if they were bowing to the Emperor of Swords. That's man and sword becoming one. No, could it be? Even Lin Tu, a pseudo-saint expert, sensed the intent emanating from Yiguchin. That intent had gradually surpassed the realm of man and sword becoming one, and was moving towards the realm of man and heaven becoming one. At a certain moment, Yiguchin plucked the zither. The wind and clouds changed colors, and heaven and earth resonated. Whoosh! Among the million soldiers of the two dynasties, as long as it was a sword, it would tremble violently and then soar into the sky. Hundreds of thousands of swords circled above the 9 heavens following Yiguchin's zither music. Heaven and earth resonated, and the firmament shook. This scene caused everyone to cry out involuntarily with shock. Yan He and the others were shocked. Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others were shocked. Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the others also felt their blood rush to their heads. This was because they seemed to have seen this scene before. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, Feng Manlu had risked his life to fight and used man and heaven becoming one. That time, it was the same. The sword pointed to the sky, and tens of thousands of swords bowed. Who would listen to the song of a swordsman? Head held high for thousands of miles, unparalleled in the world. Yi Guqian waved his hands, and the sound of the zither reached its peak. The hundreds of thousands of swords turned upside down and swept out in all directions like a storm. Heaven and earth turned into sword intent, and the universe was stirred up. The million soldiers were forced back at the same time. Their faces were pale, and blood gushed out of their mouths. Their consciousness seemed to be about to explode. The song of a swordsman had forced back a million soldiers. Chapter 1204. There was an absolute silence between heaven and earth. The million soldiers who had been pushed back were pale and had blood at the corners of their mouths. They looked at Yi Guqian, who was sitting cross-legged in the sky, with unprecedented fear in their eyes. A single note of the zither had resonated with heaven and earth. 10,000 swords had pushed back a million soldiers. What kind of profound and terrifying sword realm was this? However, Yi Guqian was frowning slightly. As expected, it's still too difficult to reach the unity of heaven and man. Yi Guqian sighed inwardly. After this epiphany, his sword realm was only a fine line away from the unity of heaven and man. However, this fine line would be difficult to break through without a better opportunity. However, Yi Guqian wasn't greedy. He was already very satisfied with this improvement. At this moment, everyone on the walls of Yan capital was frozen. That was because Yi Guqian's performance just now was too shocking. Everyone was shocked. What a terrifying sword realm. He's probably not far from the unity of heaven and man, right? Chu Qingqi exclaimed. However, this scene reminded them of the tragic scene in Wind's Sweeping Tower, and the atmosphere fell silent for a moment. On the other side, Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nia were also surprised. Such high attainments in sword Dao and the protection of a false saint expert. Even they couldn't help but be wary. Who exactly are you? Emperor Qian asked coldly. Yi Guqian didn't answer, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. Emperor Qian's face darkened when he saw that he was ignored. He was the lord of the great Qian dynasty, a true saint expert. Although Yi Guqian's sword Dao realm was high, his cultivation base wasn't high, so Emperor Qian didn't fear him at all. What he cared about was whether Yi Guqian had any power behind him. Leave. The Swallow Cloud dynasty can't be destroyed, Lin Tu said indifferently. If the Sword dynasty's Jin Kuei wanted to protect the Swallow Cloud dynasty, who would dare to destroy it? This empress is going to destroy Yenyun today. Empress Feng Nie's face was cold. She swung her palm at the city walls. Lin Tu frowned and raised his hand to clash with Empress Feng Nie's. At the same time, Emperor Qian also moved. He raised his hand and reached out toward Yi Guqian. No matter what, I'll suppress you first. Emperor Qian said coldly. Yi Guqian's background indeed made him a little wary, so he didn't kill him. He wanted to suppress Yi Guqian before destroying the great Qian Empire. By then, he believed that even if there were other forces behind Yi Guqian, they would not attack the great Qian Empire just because of a small country. Yi Guqian's expression under his mask was calm and unperturbed as he faced the approaching giant hand. In the face of a million-strong army, his expression remained unchanged. Facing a false saint expert, he had no fear. The hearts of Yan Wushuang and the others rose to their throats at this moment. They knew that the figure was the only way to save the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Just as Emperor Qian's hand was about to grab Yi Guqian, An extremely cold voice rang out from the void. How dare you suppress the Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty? You're courting death. An icy sword aura broke through the void and pierced through the void, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding void. The sword chi slashed down on the Qian Emperor's outstretched arm. The sword swept across and blood splattered everywhere. Emperor Qian's arm was directly chopped off and sent flying. Blood flowed everywhere. Cough. The sudden intense pain caused Emperor Qian to groan. His face was pale as he held his severed arm and looked at the void in the distance in horror. The void shattered as a black-robed, gray-haired figure broke through the void. His cold expression swept across the Qian Emperor, Empress Feng Nia, and the others. How dare you sneak attack His Majesty Qian Emperor? You're courting death. When the great Qian Empire's 4 heavenly guards saw that Emperor Qian's arm was severed, they immediately used their techniques to attack. No, stop. Emperor Qian's expression changed drastically. The reason for that was because he recognized who that gray-haired man was. He wasn't someone that the great Qian Empire could provoke. However, it was too late. The moment the 4 heavenly guards attacked, 4 icy sword auras condensed in the void. Splat! The 4 sword auras slashed down, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 false saint-level heavenly guards were cleanly killed. This scene caused everyone's eyes to pop out of their sockets. How terrifying was his strength to kill false saint-level experts as if they were dogs. How is this possible? Empress Feng Nie's face paled. She, who had always been majestic and domineering, felt as if her heart was being squeezed by a hand. She almost couldn't breathe. Your Sword Saint Guyan? Empress Feng Nie and Emperor Qian asked in shock. If it were any other expert, they wouldn't have lost their composure. But who was Sword Saint Guyan? He was a heavenly tribulation saint, an extraordinary being. False saint-level experts like them weren't weak, but they were still like ants in front of a saint-level expert. More importantly, they'd heard what Lin Qianhen had said. The figure who'd sat cross-legged on the 9th heaven, played the zither, and repelled millions of soldiers was Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. Everyone from the Swallow Cloud Empire was dumbfounded by this scene. They felt as if they were dreaming and it was extremely unreal. A heavenly tribulation saint had appeared in front of them alive and killed 4 false saint-level experts. Even the lofty Emperor Qian had lost an arm. What shocked Yan Wushuang and the others even more was that the person who'd saved them was the legendary Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. The Sword Dynasty was the top dynasty among the 100 great dynasties. Not only did they have a heavenly tribulation saint like Lin Qianhen, but they also had powerful half-step saint-level experts like the proud divine state. Even if the great Qian dynasty and Phoenix Nie dynasty worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for such a powerful dynasty. Your friend is Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others took a deep breath. Although the Sword Dynasty was very far away from them, they'd heard rumors about the Sword Dynasty. Yan Wushuang didn't look happy. Instead, she felt a bit disappointed. That figure wasn't the one she'd been thinking about day and night. After all, Yan Wushuang couldn't have imagined that Yi Guqin would have such a strange encounter and become Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. The probability of such a thing happening was too low, so Yan Wushuang instinctively ruled out the possibility of it being Yi Guqin. Yan Xiaotang's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He'd almost caught Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. Your friend is Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. Are you also? Yan Xiaotang swallowed and asked Mu Xingzu. Yes, I'm also the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. What's wrong? Mu Xingzu said nonchalantly. In her opinion, this identity wasn't something to brag about. Yan Xiaotang's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. He'd thought of the 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty as a lifesaver. In the end, Mu Xingzu and the others were the real big shots and saviors. His father, Yan Beilin, also looked unnatural. He'd almost given the order to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Chang'e stopped him in the end. Junior sister Mu, you've actually become the sword son of the Sword Dynasty? Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were also in disbelief. That was the high and mighty 13th sword son of the Sword Dynasty. He had a noble status and looked down on all the other dynasties. I'm nothing. Jiankui is the real powerful one, Mu Xingzu said with a smile. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others sighed. Yan Wushuang looked at the figure standing in the sky. That invincible aura reminded her of the unyielding figure who'd fought against Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haoyan. How great would it be if it's really you? Yan Wushuang's eyes gradually became hazy, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Chapter 1205. Right now, Empress Feng Nie and Emperor Qian's expressions were ugly. They originally thought that destroying the Swallow dynasty would be a piece of cake. But who would have thought that the Swallow dynasty would receive help from the Sword dynasty? How is this possible? How is the Swallow dynasty related to the Sword dynasty? Emperor Qian's heart trembled. Empress Feng Nie's face tightened. She couldn't believe it either. How was the Swallow dynasty, which didn't even have a pseudo-saint expert, related to the Sword dynasty, the number one dynasty in the 100 great dynasties? Not to mention them, even Yan He, Yan Chang'e, and the others were confused. They didn't know why the Sword dynasty would help the Swallow dynasty. Even a heavenly tribulation saint had made an appearance. However, Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nie knew that they wouldn't be able to destroy the Swallow dynasty today. After this news spread, the Swallow dynasty's status and influence would skyrocket. After all, even the Sword dynasty had come out to protect the Swallow dynasty. One could imagine that no other dynasty would dare to humiliate the Swallow dynasty in the future. However, Empress Feng Nie wasn't willing to leave just like that. Sometimes, a woman's obsession was so deep. Seeing that Empress Feng Nie still wasn't willing to give up, Ling Qianhen's eyes darkened. Since he was here, he naturally had to help Yi Guqin protect the Swallow dynasty. Boom! Ling Qianhen raised his hand. He didn't even need to use his divine weapon. Instead, he used his fingers as a sword. A terrifying sword light swept across the sky, slashing toward Empress Feng Nie. Empress Feng Nie's expression changed. She felt a suffocating sword energy rushing toward her. She tried to block it, but she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her jade-like hands were cut by the sword energy. Mother! Princess Feng Xi's face was pale. She hurried forward and stood in front of Empress Feng Nie. Her beautiful eyes turned towards Yi Guqin, because she knew that the real mastermind was not Ling Qianhen, but the Sword dynasty's Jiankui. Lord Jiankui, I hope you can be magnanimous and let my mother go. Princess Feng Xi bowed to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin sighed when he saw this. Who would have thought that the mysterious and noble young girl from back then would actually show such a humble attitude? This was the change brought about by status. However, on account of his friendship with Princess Feng Xi in the past, Yi Guqin wouldn't kill him. Yi Guqin directly transmitted his voice to Ling Qianhen. Ling Qianhen nodded and said, "You may leave. But remember, do not take a single step into the Swallow Cloud dynasty's territory, or else." Ling Qianhen didn't finish his sentence, but everyone knew what the consequences would be. When retired Emperor Yan He heard this, his old face twitched slightly due to excitement. This sentence was the best guarantee for the Swallow Cloud dynasty's safety. After all, the one who had said that was a true saint. Empress Feng Nie had completely given up. She knew that she no longer had a chance. Emperor Qian let out a deep breath. His eyes were filled with resentment. What? You're not convinced? Ling Qianhen noticed Emperor Qian's gaze. His tone was cold. No, of course not. Emperor Qian lowered his head and gritted his teeth. 4 heavenly guards were killed, and one of his arms was cut off. As a false saint, the emperor of the Great Gan dynasty, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? However, he couldn't take revenge. He even had to lower his head and admit defeat. One could imagine how furious Emperor Qian was. It's all because of that Jinkui. Emperor Qian's heart was cold. If you don't have it, then get lost. Ling Qianhen's words shook heaven and earth. Millions of soldiers retreated. Their faces were pale, and their fighting spirit had long been exhausted. In the end, the armies of the Great Gan dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty retreated like the tide. Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Nye could only leave. A majestic war of annihilation ended in such a dramatic manner. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud dynasty's imperial family still felt like they were dreaming. They were all prepared to die, but they didn't expect such a turn of events. However, they all knew that the Swallow Cloud dynasty was only able to survive because of Jinkui. When they thought of this, Yan He, Yan Chang'e, Yan Beilin, and Yan Wushuang all looked at the figure standing in the sky. Thank you, Sword Saint Guyun and Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty for your help. Yan He cupped his hands at Yi Guqin. Yan Wushuang also bowed at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin nodded and didn't say anything. Now wasn't the time to reveal his identity for a reunion. Yan Chang'e said, I wonder if we can have the honor of inviting Sword Saint Guyun and Jinkui for a reunion so that the Swallow Cloud dynasty can express our gratitude. Ling Qianhen shook his head and said, that won't be necessary. He didn't like crowds to begin with. This time, he had helped because of Yi Guqin. He actually had nothing to do with the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Everyone in the Swallow Cloud dynasty knew that Ling Qianhen couldn't have anything to do with them. Then, the only possibility was Jinkui. However, they couldn't figure out what the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui had to do with the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Many people looked at Mu Xingzu, thinking that it might be because of Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu didn't say anything because Yi Guqin had warned her not to say anything. Then, Yi Guqin didn't say a word and turned to leave. Just like when he came, he didn't ask for anything in return, nor did he ask the Swallow Cloud dynasty for anything in return. Tisk, tsk. As expected of the sword leader of the First Dynasty. A single tune of his zither caused 1,000,000 mighty soldiers to retreat, and he comes and goes as he pleases. How many people in the younger generation can compare to such bearing? Everyone in the Swallow capital sighed. In the next few days, the Swallow capital was decorated with lanterns and streamers to celebrate. Mu Xingzu also became a real VIP and received the best treatment. At night, outside the lively palace in the Swallow capital, Yan Wushuang walked out of the banquet with her slender and round legs to relax. The experience in the past few days was a bit of a roller coaster ride for her. At that moment, Yan Wushuang suddenly felt that someone was watching her. She took a step forward and walked gracefully. Who is it? Yan Wushuang shouted. She saw a figure standing on top of a fake mountain in front of her. He was wearing a black robe, and his black hair was fluttering in the night wind. He was wearing a ghost mask that seemed to be laughing and crying at the same time. Yan Wushuang's body froze as if she was struck by lightning. Have you been watching me in the dark for the past few days? Yan Wushuang's heart suddenly trembled. She didn't expect that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui would be watching her in the dark. That figure was silent and didn't say a word. Yan Wushuang was so nervous that she almost stopped breathing because that figure was similar to the person she had been dreaming of. Is it you? Yan Wushuang's eyes were slightly hazy with tears, and the scene in front of her seemed to be blurry. That figure didn't say a word and disappeared into the night sky in a flash. Yan Wushuang's body trembled as she sat on the ground, feeling lost. On the other side, Yi Guqin slowly took off the ghost mask on his face in the sky where the moon was bright and the stars were few. Under the illumination of the moonlight, his handsome face revealed a hint of melancholy. Shuang, see you in the battlefield of the prodigies. Chapter 1206. The matter in the Yenyun dynasty had come to an end for the time being. This matter had also caused quite a stir. After all, 4 false saints had fallen, and even the Qian emperor had lost an arm. After the news spread, the Yenyun dynasty, an ordinary high-tier dynasty, became the most untouchable existence. After staying in the Yan capital for a few days, Mu Xingzu also bid farewell. "Senior sister Yan, will you participate in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides?" asked Mu Xingzu. "Yes." Yan Wushuang nodded slightly. In the past year, her cultivation had not lagged behind, and she had reached the divine dwelling stage. "Great, we'll meet again in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides. There might be a surprise then." Mu Xingzu smiled. "A surprise?" Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly. Ever since Yi Guqin had disappeared after consuming the 9 deaths no regrets pill, there was nothing that could be considered a surprise to her. After leaving the Yan capital, Mu Xingzu and Yi Guqin met up. "Are we really not going to meet senior sister Yan and the others? I feel that senior sister Yan has been very disappointed." Mu Xingzu hesitated. "We'll meet again when it's time." "Alright, let's go back." Yi Guqin waved his hand indifferently. They then boarded the flying boat and flew back to the Sword Dynasty. On the other side, in the palace of the great Qian dynasty, the Qian emperor sat on the dragon throne, and a group of princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty knelt before him. At this moment, the princes and princesses were filled with righteous indignation and were criticizing Yi Guqin. "Jiankui is too arrogant. He's just a cripple." "That's right. His divine dwelling was destroyed by Huang Qianqiu of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. What right does a cripple have to be arrogant?" The princes and princesses all wanted to show off in front of the Qian emperor. "Enough!" The Qian emperor shouted coldly, silencing all the princes and princesses in the hall. "I now announce that whoever can kill Jiankui in the Battle of the Heavenly Prides will be the emperor of the great Qian dynasty." As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, the eyes of all the princes and princesses shone brightly. On the battlefield of geniuses, one's life and death depended on oneself. The forces behind one's back could not interfere. Moreover, the fact that Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty had his spiritual dwelling destroyed by Huang Qianqiu was no longer a secret. Many people knew about it. There were even people who mocked the Sword Dynasty for letting a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling take the position of Jiankui. Under these circumstances, the princes and princesses felt that they had a chance to eliminate Yi Guqin. Emperor Qian's eyes were filled with coldness. "Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty, I will take your life as compensation for this arm of mine." On the Feng Nie dynasty's side, Princess Feng Shi was also summoned by Empress Feng Nie. "Find a chance to kill that Jiankui on the battlefield of prodigies," Empress Feng Nie said coldly. "But..." Princess Feng Shi hesitated. Because in her opinion, Empress Feng Nie was being too paranoid. "There are no buts. You don't have to worry about anything on the battlefield of prodigies. Jiankui is just a cripple with a crippled divine dwelling. Even if you don't kill him, someone else will," Empress Feng Nie said coldly. Princess Feng Shi sighed inwardly and nodded. Although the incident in the Swallow Cloud dynasty had caused a stir, it wasn't a big deal and soon died down. However, the Swallow Cloud dynasty's reputation had soared because of this incident. No other dynasty dared to provoke the Swallow Cloud dynasty. And after this matter had passed, another even bigger matter swept through the entire South Horizon region like a wildfire burning the plains. This major incident was naturally the opening of the Battlefield of Prodigies. The qualifiers for the Battlefield of Prodigies had started more than a year ago. The prodigies of the 100 great dynasties and various forces were all rubbing their fists and preparing for a big fight. It could be said that the Battlefield of Prodigies was the most dazzling stage in the South Horizon region. Only prodigies who performed well in the Battlefield of Prodigies were qualified to be taken in as disciples by the Overlord forces. All the prodigies wanted to join the Overlord forces no matter what. The reason was simple. The Overlord forces had a long history and controlled the richest resources in the South Horizon region. This was something that no dynasty could compare to. Even the Sword Dynasty, which was known as the #1 dynasty and the Holy Land of Sword cultivators, couldn't compare with the Overlord forces. If a sword cultivator had to choose a place to cultivate the sword, he definitely wouldn't choose the sword dynasty. He would choose the Heavenly God's sword sect or one of the 4 sword pavilions. Of course, there was another more important reason. Becoming a disciple of an overlord force would give one face and confidence. The reason why Gu Xiaoyang could be so arrogant and even Pei Tu didn't dare to go too far in the Mola dynasty was because he had the Starry Sword Pavilion behind him. The reason why Di Haotian could do whatever he wanted and even destroy the Su family was because he had the Heavenly God Sword sect behind him. It could be said that an overlord force was the biggest backer and the biggest deterrent. The reason why Yi Guqin wanted to join the battlefield of prodigies was because he needed a stable backer. Even though the Sword Dynasty was the #1 dynasty, it was still very stressful to deal with an overlord force. Especially after Yi Guqin's identity was exposed. Because he had the immemorial demon sword, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. The Sword Dynasty couldn't protect him. Only an overlord level force would be able to intimidate his enemies and prevent them from doing as they pleased. On the way back to the Sword Dynasty, he was thinking about his future arrangements. Those forces that he had a grudge with or had enemies naturally couldn't join. This way, he eliminated the Heavenly God Sword sect, the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and the Dongfang family. The Battle God Saber sect wasn't suitable for him. The Annihilation Demon sect could let Duguqiu Mo test the waters. The Misty Sword Pavilion had Yitsang Yue, which was a little troublesome. As for the Shiman clan, Nangong clan, Baiming clan, and other clans, they were bloodline clans after all. They were far less eager to recruit disciples than the sections. As for the 3 hidden forces, the 1 mountain, 1 sea, and 1 immortal valley, they didn't take the initiative to recruit, and they rarely recruited geniuses from the outside world, so they could be excluded for the time being. Moreover, Yi Guqin had always had doubts about the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain. His relationship with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain was a bit confusing. Therefore, Yi Guqin would never consider getting in touch with the Sword Clan of Sky Mountain before confirming their relationship. Therefore, after such a selection, Yi Guqin's only choice was the Luofu Sword Pavilion. Is the Luofu Sword Pavilion the only one left? I remember that it seems to be the sect that Jun Xiaoyao is from, Yi Guqin muttered to himself. He still hadn't forgotten that handsome young man in white who was as elegant as a celestial being. While Jun Xiaoyao had only saved him once from Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Guqin had never forgotten the favor he had done for him. However, I can't be sure yet. I don't know what the Luofu Sword Pavilion's attitude is. Yi Guqin was very cautious. He couldn't choose to join the Luofu Sword Pavilion just because of Jun Xiaoyao. Moreover, plans couldn't keep up with changes. Who knew what would happen on the battlefield of geniuses? Chapter 1207. After returning to the Sword Dynasty, Yi Guqin also began his final preparations for the battlefield of prodigies. Yi Guqin's name would reappear in the eyes of the world on the battlefield of prodigies. Yi Guqin, who had been forced into a corner in the Tianhuang Plains, would return with a towering rage and vengeance. When that time came, no one would dare to be high and mighty in front of Yi Guqin. As time passed, the day of the battlefield of prodigies finally drew near. A storm was brewing in the entire South Horizon region as a great change occurred. The various sects, empires, and factions all began to take action. Their target was the sacred city of Fortune at the edge of the Sacred Emperor World. On the eve of the Sacred Emperor World's opening, the sacred city of Fortune was clearly the most lively place. For a time, the Nantian region was in turmoil. The Battle of Prodigies was about to begin, on a majestic mountain peak in the War God Dynasty. A group of people stood in a row. Among them, there were both men and women. Every one of them had a surging aura. However, 2 youths were the most eye-catching. One of them was a young man wearing platinum dragon-patterned armor. He was slender and handsome, and he held a golden spear in his hand. His aura was disdainful, and he was in high spirits. He was as vigorous as a white dragon, and his aura was vast. This was the son of the Heaven War Emperor, the first on the war god list, Zhao Shinkong. Zhao Shinkong was known as the Little War God in the War God dynasty. His cultivation was comparable to the prodigies of the overlord forces. Beside him was a young man wearing tiger-patterned black gold armor. He was tall and powerful, and he carried a tiger-headed golden spear on his back. His aura was not much weaker than Zhao Shinkong's. However, this young man's face was gloomy and cold, and his eyes were filled with bone-deep killing intent. This young man was the second on the war god list. His name was Xiao Weihuang. Of course, he also had another identity. He was the son of the Earth War Emperor. The Earth War Emperor had been killed by the proud divine continent in the battle against the Sword Dynasty. Because of this, one could imagine how Zhao Weihuang felt. He held great hatred and resentment towards the Sword Dynasty. The person he hated the most was not the proud divine continent who had killed the Earth War Emperor, but Ye Guqin. Because with his strength, he could not take revenge on the proud divine continent, so he could only vent his anger and hatred on Ye Guqin. If not for Ye Guqin saving the proud divine continent from the heavenless sword realm, it would have been impossible for the proud divine continent to have the chance to kill the Earth War Emperor. Therefore, Ye Guqin was the main culprit behind the Earth War Emperor's death. This was Zhao Weihuang's idea. In addition, Ye Guqin also knew some people in this group. For example, there was a 13-year-old girl who looked like she was carved out of jade. Her eyes were bright, and she had 2 ponytails behind her head. When she smiled, her small canine teeth would be revealed. She was Zhao Xiaodi, ranked 8th on the God of War list. She was also the daughter of the Heaven Battle Emperor and the younger sister of Zhao Shinkong. In addition, there was also the similarly gloomy and valiant young Marquis Zhong Shan. His father, the heroic martial Marquis, also died in the War of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the 10th battle on the God of War list, undefeated. It could be said that the top 10 geniuses on the God of War list were all gathered here. At this moment, a golden sun suddenly appeared in the sky, emitting endless rays of light. However, if one looked closely, they would see a majestic and blurry figure within the sun. That majestic figure exuded a powerful aura, and the space around him was faintly distorted. Seeing this figure, all the geniuses present bowed and cupped their fists. "Greetings, Your Majesty." All the geniuses said. "Greetings, Father." Zhao Shinkong and Zhao Xiaodi also said. The figure wrapped in the sun was the leader of the God of War dynasty, the Heaven Battle Emperor. His strength was not only at the Sage Realm, but also at the Sage King Realm. Otherwise, how could he have the qualifications to lead the second strongest dynasty? This emperor only has one request for going to the battlefield of geniuses. The Heaven Battle Emperor paused, then said, "The 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty are all dead." His cold words resounded through the heavens and earth. Everyone present was stunned. The Heaven Battle Emperor wanted to kill all 13 sword princes of the Sword Dynasty in the sacred imperial realm. Because of the special rules of the battlefield of geniuses, the forces behind the geniuses could not interfere with the life and death of the geniuses. Therefore, the battlefield of geniuses was the cruelest battlefield for the geniuses of the various forces to kill each other. "I will not disappoint Your Majesty." Zhao Weihuang shouted, his murderous intent clear. If there was anyone who hated the Sword Dynasty the most, it would be Zhao Weihuang. "Jiankui, Dugu Wubai, I, Zhao Weihuang, will personally take your head to appease my father's soul in heaven." Zhao Weihuang swore in his heart. Zhong Shan and the other geniuses also had solemn expressions, their murderous intent surging. Zhao Shinkong did not have any deep-seated hatred for the Sword Dynasty, but he would do his best to carry out the Heaven Battle Emperor's orders. Among the geniuses present, only Zhao Xiaodi had a bitter expression, her eyes wide with worry. Because in the sacred imperial realm, she had traveled together with Ye Guqin. Although they were not very close, they could be considered acquaintances. However, when they met again in the battlefield of geniuses, it would probably be a battle to the death between the two dynasties. What should Xiaodi do then? Zhao Xiaodi frowned. At the same time, the geniuses on the sword ranking of the Tyrant Sword Dynasty also received orders to kill the Sword Dynasty's geniuses if possible. This was to take revenge for the previous battle. After all, the Tyrant Sword Dynasty had also lost a saint, Hu Tianxiong. The princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty were rubbing their palms, ready to go. They were planning how to kill Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. There was also the Phoenix Nye dynasty. Princess Phoenix Dawn stood on a flying ship, her face filled with disappointment. Sword Dynasty. Jin Kuei, all the dynasties had targeted the Sword Dynasty. It could be said that the Sword Dynasty was targeted like never before. Many dynasties had designs on the Sword Dynasty. Especially since the news of Yi Guqin's spiritual estate recovering hadn't spread. Thus, the outside world still thought that Yi Guqin's spiritual estate had been destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. How glorious was it to step on Jin Kuei of the First Dynasty. Thus, many people wanted to use Yi Guqin's identity as Jin Kuei to rise up and become famous in the South Sky region. There were many geniuses with such thoughts. Of course, the geniuses of the various dynasties were the main forces in the battlefield. However, the geniuses of the overlord forces were even more dazzling. Compared to the geniuses of the dynasties, the overlord forces were the true peak existences in the battlefield. In one of the 4 sword pavilions, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, a seclusion area. A clear whistle spread out in all directions, and the entire mountain valley trembled with a rumble. Many disciples of the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion were alarmed and walked out to take a look. In the depths of the valley, purple light filled the air and illuminated the sky. A figure appeared out of nowhere, and his aura had reached the 8th heaven of the Divine Palace. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu has come out of seclusion. Tisk Tsk, senior brother Huang Qianqiu is one of the 4 emperors, the proud emperor, and he has the heaven desolate war body. Even the strongest of the Sword Dynasty, Jin Kuei, had his spiritual estate destroyed by senior brother Huang Qianqiu. He lost all his cultivation and became a cripple. Many disciples of the Imperial Heavenly Sword Pavilion exclaimed in admiration. This time, Huang Qianqiu would definitely show off his invincible prowess in the prodigy battlefield and sweep through all 4 directions. Chapter 1208. Purple light burst into the sky, and the entire sky was filled with purple mist. Huang Qianqiu broke out of his cultivation in such a strange scene. His purple hair fluttered in the wind, and his purple eyes were filled with divine light. He was handsome, and his body was slender and strong like a real dragon. He had an intimidating aura about him, as if he was a deity who had just come out of his cultivation. Huang Qianqiu was one of the 4 sovereigns, and he was known as the Proud Sovereign. This represented Huang Qianqiu's personality. He was arrogant, domineering, and insufferably arrogant. His real opponents were only Di Haotian and a few others. Tisk, Tsk. Senior brother Huang Qianqiu's aura is too strong. Once he uses the Tianhuang body, who can beat him? Many disciples of the Imperial Celestial Sword Pavilion exclaimed. Huang Qianqiu had the Tianhuang body, so his hair, eyes, and even his blood were all purple. This Tianhuang body was extremely powerful and domineering. The more he fought, the stronger he became. It was said that he was undefeatable. At this moment, Huang Qianqiu looked into the distance and mumbled to himself, Huang Qianqiu will climb to the top again in this battlefield of geniuses. And that Sword Dynasty's Jin Kuei. If he shows up, I will definitely dig out his secrets. Huang Qianqiu had never forgotten about Yi Guqin's ultimate sword domain. If he could get his hands on such a powerful technique, Huang Qianqiu could challenge Di Haotian's authority. In the Starfall Mountains where the Starry Sword Pavilion was located. In a valley, 4 streams of Zhen Qi shot up into the sky. In the sky, there were 4 stars twinkling. Soon after, 4 figures appeared. They were 4 young men in silver clothes. They looked similar. They were 4 brothers, known as the 4 young star lords. Each of them had an extraordinary bearing. The 4 of them were 4 of the 7 great bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion. They represented Dubhe, Tianxian, Fekta, and Migres. In addition, there was Gu Xiaoyang of the Mizar Star, Zhou Heng of the Alioth Star, and Song Yuyao of the Alcade Star, who had already passed away. Our goal this time is not only to get the opportunity to break through to the Venerable Realm in the Holy Emperor world, but more importantly, to deal with Jun Xiaoyao of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion. Among the 4 people, a young man in the lead said coldly. Of course. With the 4 of us working together, even Jun Xiaoyao wouldn't be able to escape. Moreover, we still have that trump card. It's enough to trap and kill Jun Xiaoyao in the Holy Imperial Realm. Another young man with a similar face sneered. That's for the best. If we succeed, the status of us 4 brothers will definitely rise greatly, and will be on par with Gu Xiaoyang, said the 3rd youth with a smile. That's true. Gu Xiaoyang is getting weaker and weaker. Recently, I heard that he couldn't even suppress the geniuses of the Molo dynasty. What a joke. The youngest young man shook his head and laughed. In the eyes of the geniuses from the overlord forces, the geniuses from the various dynasties were naturally inferior and were not worthy of their attention. It was indeed unexpected that Gu Xiaoyang couldn't suppress a dynasty's prodigy. No matter what, we 4 Star Lords will definitely make the Starry Sword Pavilion famous in the battlefield of prodigies this time. The eldest of the 4 brothers said with ambition in his eyes. In another place of seclusion in the Starfall Mountains, starlight flowed and an aura surged. Gu Xiaoyang, who was wearing a robe and a crown, came out of seclusion. There was a crack in between his eyebrows, and there seemed to be the change of the sun and the moon, as well as the fall of the stars. That was his special ability, the starry eyes. It contained all the stars in the sky and turned into an amazing ability. The battlefield of prodigies will be the stage where I, Gu Xiaoyang, will rise again and become famous. Those opponents will become my stepping stones. Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were filled with confidence and ambition. His starry eyes had reached a higher level, and his strength had increased greatly. Therefore, he was more confident. The Luo Fu Sword Pavilion was located in an ethereal fairyland. There was a pavilion on top of a picturesque peak with a serene scenery. There were 2 figures in the pavilion, a man and a woman. The woman was wearing a long green dress with tassels. She looked elegant. The man in front of her was wearing an elegant white robe. His face was as handsome as a fairy. His hair was like a knife, and his eyebrows were like ink. His face was like jade, and he looked very handsome. He was as ethereal as a fairy, and people would be fascinated just by looking at him. The woman in the green dress was tidying up the clothes of the handsome man in white. She looked worried and said, Xiaoyao, you have to be careful of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, and other forces in the battlefield of prodigies. Heh. I know. The young man smiled gently. He was none other than the top genius of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, one of the top 10 young masters, Jun Xiaoyao. The woman in the green dress was his partner, Li Qing. Back in the Tianhuang plains of the Saint Origin dynasty, Jun Xiaoyao and Yiguchen met for the first time. It was when he asked Yiguchen to pick the superior 9-colored epiphyllum. That flower was the gift he wanted to give to Li Qing. Sigh, although there are many geniuses in the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, there are very few who are truly top-notch. The Starry Sword Pavilion has the 7 Great Bears, and the Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion has not only Huang Qianqiu, but also the geniuses on the Dragon Phoenix ranking, Qin Qingshao, and others. Li Qing, looked worried. Don't worry, Qing, but it's still a pity for that person. Jun Xiaoyao seemed to have thought of something and shook his head slightly. Li Qing said, You mean, that person who took the God Devourer's sword and severely injured the true dragon of Haotian in the Tianhuang plains, Yiguchen? That's right. It's a pity that brother Yi died. He was a ruthless person who could take on Di Haotian head-on. If he could join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, the younger generation of the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion might not necessarily be suppressed. Jun Xiaoyao felt that it was a pity. But then again, there will definitely be many dark horses in the battle of geniuses this time. Xiaoyao, you can choose to make friends with some of them and get them to join the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion, Li Qing'er said. Of course. If we don't recruit some geniuses, the Luo Fu Sword Pavilion will be in trouble in the next sword conference of the Four Directions Sword Pavilions. Jun Xiaoyao smiled faintly. After bidding farewell, Jun Xiaoyao stepped onto a white crane and soared into the clouds. In the era of great battles, geniuses compete. I have a feeling that the battle of geniuses this time will be very interesting. Jun Xiaoyao stood in the wind with his hands behind his back, like a deity riding on a crane. In a valley of the misty sword pavilion where moonlight shone. Yi Cangyue, who was dressed in a white robe, had a powerful aura surging from her body. At some point, a ball of inextinguishable light spread out from her body. However, that was not all. Within the ball of light, one could vaguely see a beam of light condensing, bringing with it a sharp aura. Is this the embryonic form of a sword? Yi Cangyue's expression froze, revealing a complicated and puzzled look. After that ridiculous incident between her and Dugu, Yi Cangyue felt that the inextinguishable divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. However, she did not expect that the embryonic form of a sword was gradually being nurtured within the inextinguishable divine embryo. This. Could it be? No. This is impossible. Suddenly, Yi Cangyue thought of a possibility. She shook her head, her face pale, unable to believe it. Chapter 1209. This transformation made Yi Cangyue think of a possibility. The innate indestructible sword embryo. This was a powerful technique that came from the fusion of the indestructible divine embryo and the innate sword embryo. The innate sword embryo was surrounded by chaotic aura and was extremely sharp and could destroy everything. The indestructible divine embryo was round and indestructible. It had powerful suppression, sealing, and defensive powers. The innate indestructible sword embryo combined the strengths of both. It had the destructive power of the innate sword embryo and the indestructible power of the indestructible divine embryo. It could be said to be a powerful technique. Yi Cangyue also wanted to get this technique, but the price she had to pay was to give up her virginity. Yi Cangyue couldn't make up her mind, so she didn't give Gu Xiaoyang a chance. But now, the thing in her body was the innate indestructible sword embryo. How is that possible? Dugu didn't have the innate sword embryo. Yi Cangyue was confused. But suddenly, she thought of another person. A person who was rumored to have died a long time ago and was almost forgotten by many. Yi Guqin. No, it's absolutely impossible for it to be Yi Guqin. He took the 9 deaths without regrets pellet and has already died. As for Dugu Qiuma, it's even more impossible for him to be Yi Guqin. That's simply too absurd. Dugu's seeking demon had triggered the 9 heavens vision of the demon emperor. He was very different from Yi Guqin in all aspects and couldn't be connected at all. Yi Cangyue would never believe that Dugu's seeking demon was Yi Guqin. After thinking for a while, Yi Cangyue still couldn't figure it out. Dugu's seeking demon. Yi Cangyue's expression was complicated and cold. She had mixed feelings. She didn't expect the innate indestructible sword embryo to be obtained in such a ridiculous way. She looked in the direction of the sacred emperor world. If nothing went wrong, Dugu's seeking demon would also participate in the battlefield of geniuses. How should she face him then? In the Nantian region, the geniuses of the 4 sword pavilions were all ready to go. Even though not all the chosen ones would enter the Holy Emperor universe, it was still a feast to watch from the outside. Of course, the 4 cardinal sword pavilions were not the only ones taking action. One of the 3 great sects of the South Horizon region, the encampment of the demonic extermination sect. Dressed in a black dress, Wan was looking into the distance. She was charming, like a peerless fairy. In the distant sky, there were 10 huge black demonic figures standing tall. The surrounding dark clouds were gloomy, and tens of thousands of ghosts were wailing. It was like the 18 layers of hell. To what extent has the Yama King's strength reached? Wan-Er's eyes were filled with astonishment and solemnity. The Holy Yama was definitely a powerful and terrifying genius. The 10 enormous black demonic figures standing in the sky were the special phenomenon that he possessed, and they were called the 10 Yama Kings. This phenomenon was not much weaker than Dugu's demon emperor descending to the 9 heavens. In the demonic extermination sect, the Holy Yama could be said to be one of the most outstanding talents. He was also the most popular candidate for the position of young sect master of the demonic sect. He also had another identity. He was one of the 4 emperors of the 1 emperor and 4 emperors, the Hell Emperor. Proud sovereign and Huang Qinqiu. The Hell Emperor and the Holy Yama. These people were the top existences of the younger generation in the South Horizon region. Few people could match them. Dugu, the battlefield of prodigies, is the only chance for you to catch up with these top prodigies. You have to grasp it well. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll become someone else's stepping stone, Wan-Er muttered to herself. Battle God Saber Sect. In front of a magnificent waterfall that was hundreds of feet high. A sloppily dressed young man with messy hair wielded a rusty ancient saber as he slashed at the 300 m tall waterfall. The saber light was so bright that it directly split the waterfall vertically and rolled back into the sky. This scene was extremely shocking. And this young man was unsurprisingly Gu Zun. Just then, a hearty voice rang out. Gu Zun, this should be your 10,000th swing of the saber. Not far away, a handsome young man in white with a long crystal saber on his back appeared. There was a hint of admiration on his face. This person was the genius of the Battle God Saber sect, Dao Wumeng. He was also one of the 10 young masters, young Master Fusheng. On the battlefield of prodigies, I'll kill whoever stands in my way. Gu Zun's tone was cold. It won't be difficult for you, who has comprehended a perfect and peerless saber move, Dao Wumeng said with a faint smile. He had a premonition that the 10 young masters would have a great change in this battlefield of prodigies. Because there might be old young masters who would fall and new young masters who would rise. The leader of the 3 sects, the Heavenly God Sword sect. In a forbidden area with an array formation. More than 10 types of rare flames were constantly being refined. In the midst of the flames, a golden sword covered in crystals floated. Some of the crystals on the sword had melted and fallen off, but most of them were still in a sealed state. This sword was the self-titled Human Emperor's sword. Su Jianxue was sleeping in the Human Emperor's sword and had sealed herself. At the same time, another longsword that was emitting a bright golden light was also exerting power to wear down the Human Emperor's sword. It was the Heavenly Emperor's sword. On the side, Di Haotian was sitting cross-legged on a futon. He was wearing a simple and loose white robe. His skin was as white as jade. His long golden hair was as bright as gold. His silver eyes were as deep as the sea and carried a kind of indifference. His appearance was also extremely handsome, and his entire body exuded a celestial sense of perfection. Di Haotian was like a banished immortal. He sat cross-legged in the mortal world but did not belong to it. He had been in seclusion for more than a year. He had spared no effort for the Human Emperor's sword. Right at this moment, a figure suddenly flashed over from afar. It was a handsome young man. He was tall and straight and had the aura of a prodigy. There seemed to be endless sword chi flowing around him. Even his pitch-black eyes seemed to be overflowing with sword chi, cutting through the void. It was certain that he was an extremely powerful prodigy. He could be at the top of the South Horizon region. However, he was very respectful to Di Haotian. He stepped forward and cupped his hands. Senior brother Haotian, the Saint Emperor world is about to open. Are you not going? Di Haotian's expression did not change. He said calmly, the opportunities in the Saint Emperor world are useless to me. I can even reach the divine transcendence realm if I want to, let alone the venerable realm. Di Haotian's tone was calm but domineering. He could reach the saint realm if he wanted to. Senior Brother Haotian, you are indeed worthy of being called Senior Brother Haotian. Ordinary people like me can only look up to you. The handsome young man's eyes were filled with fanaticism. Ha, you don't have to belittle yourself. As one of the top 10 young masters, young Master Xuanzhen has the King of Swords body. You can definitely take the lead in this trip to the Saint Emperor world, Di Haotian said calmly. The handsome young man was called Chu Xuanzhen. He was also one of the top 10 young masters and was called Young Master Xuanzhen. His body constitution was the special King of Swords body. He was born with the heart of the sword and could control thousands of swords. Among the top 10 young masters, Chu Xuanzhen's strength was enough to rank in the top 5. That was how powerful the King of Swords body was. However, such a peerless genius was willing to submit to Di Haotian. It showed how powerful Di Haotian's strength was. It could be said that in the entire Nantian region, except for Yi Guchen, who had used the move of borrowing the sword from heaven to severely injure Di Haotian at the risk of his life, no one among the younger generation had truly injured Di Haotian. Senior Brother Haotian, are you not going to participate in this battlefield of geniuses? Chu Xuanzhen asked. After that, I will go to Sky Burial Island, Di Haotian said calmly. Sky Burial Island. Chu Xuanzhen was excited. Sky Burial Island was where the real battlefield of geniuses was. There would be the cruelest slaughter with the geniuses from the dark world. The Saint Emperor world was just the prelude to the battlefield of geniuses. Chapter 12:10. The prodigy battlefield was about to begin. The entire Nantian region was in a state of turmoil. All the dynasties were on the move. The 3 major sects, the 4 sword pavilions, and the various aristocratic families were all ready. Countless prodigies were rubbing their fists, eager to show off their skills. Outside the imperial city of the Maluo dynasty, a large group of people was also ready to go. On the deck of a black floating warship, Duguqiuma stood with his hands behind his back. His long white hair fluttered in the air. His aura was like that of an unparalleled demon king. He was evil and domineering. Beside him, even Princess Luo Ho, who had always been ice-cold and fond of killing, felt her temperament being suppressed by him. At this moment, she was more like a real woman who was willing to submit to Duguqiuma. Because during this period, Princess Luo Ho had really been conquered by Duguqiuma. Whether it was physically or spiritually. Qiuma, this prodigy battlefield is very unfavorable for the Maluo dynasty. Princess Luo Ho's delicate body was close to Duguqiuma's side. Her tone was very soft. She would only show her true feminine side in front of Duguqiuma. The reason why Princess Luo Ho was worried was very simple. Because almost all the prodigies on the Maluo dynasty's blood ranking were dead. Duguqiuma alone had killed Yuan Hua, Master Hun Mo, Miao Yu, Shan Yu, and the others. Others such as the Sky Witch Sect's disciple and Blood Demon Boy had also died in the Azura Bloody Road. This meant that the prodigy battlefield this time was the one with the least number of prodigies in the history of the Maluo dynasty. It's fine. They're just a bunch of weaklings. They'll just be sacrificing their lives. Duguqiuma's lips curled into a cold smile. I, Duguqiuma, am more than enough to defeat thousands of soldiers and horses. He said this not because he was arrogant, but because he really had the strength to do so. Battle God Demon Body, Soul Devouring Demon Eye, Khanate Purple Chi, Heaven Demon Fate, and Demon Emperor descending to the 9th heaven. With the addition of the 5 unique talents, Duguqiuma's combat strength was unparalleled. In addition, he had the strength of the 3rd heavenly layer of the divine dwelling realm, the soul-extinguishing flame and the demon sword emperor's heaven taboo supreme arts, the Azura Saint King's inheritance, the heart of the Saint King, the Yellow Springs Blood River domain, and the ancient demon sword, God Devourer. With such a luxurious gift pack, it would be strange if Dugu still couldn't sweep through everything. Princess Luoho's beautiful eyes were filled with infatuation when she heard this. Dugu Qiumo's cold and domineering aura made her deeply infatuated. Yes, I believe you. Princess Luohua relaxed. As long as Dugu Qiumo was here, even if there were only the two of them in the Moro dynasty, they would be able to dominate a region. Dugu murmured in his heart as he gazed into the distance. If I become a demon, then the demon will bring disaster to the world. If I become a king, then the world will respect the emperor. Meanwhile, outside the Sword Emperor city of the Sword Dynasty, the vast and mighty army was also ready to set off. As the first dynasty of the 100 great dynasties, the Sword Dynasty always received the most attention every time the prodigy battlefield opened. The leading figures of the Sword Dynasty's prodigies, the 13 swordsmen, naturally received more attention. As for the leader of the 13 swordsmen, Jinkui, naturally received more attention. During this trip to the prodigy battlefield, many people in the outside world criticized Jinkui of the Sword Dynasty. After all, it was no secret that Yiguchen's spiritual abode had been destroyed by Huang Qinqiu. Almost everyone knew about it. Many people were waiting to see the Sword Dynasty's performance, and many wanted to add insult to injury. At that moment, the 13 swordsmen stood side by side on the city walls of the Sword Emperor city. Everyone wore the same Sword Master mask on their faces. Only Yiguchen, who was in the middle, wore a grimace mask that looked like it was laughing and crying at the same time. Not only did it not look out of place, but it also made him look special and mysterious. In front of them stood Confuzi and Wu Hongyan. Both of their cultivations had broken through to the sacred transcendence realm. In other words, apart from Etian Qing, who had left, the Sword Dynasty now had 3 heavenly tribulation saints and a half-step Saint King, the Proud Continent. However, the Proud Continent and Leng Qianhen had to stay in the Sword Dynasty. Therefore, the leaders this time were Confuzi and Wu Hongyan. Everyone, I'm sure you know that because of the last battle, the Sword Dynasty has made too many enemies. The War God Dynasty, Maluo Dynasty, and Domineering Sword Dynasty will probably do you harm. Wu Hongyan's expression was serious, and her tone was serious. The Sword Dynasty was indeed in a very dangerous situation during this trip to the prodigy battlefield. The 13 swordsmen in front of them would be targeted and suppressed like never before. Ha! We don't know who will be the one to settle the score. I swore that on the prodigy battlefield, I will kill the prodigies of the 3 dynasties. Jian Jingheng, who was wearing a mask, said in a murderous tone. During this time, his heavenly sword will had completely transformed into the heavenly sword Dao. It was a true creation realm sword Dao, and its power was undeniable. That's right. The Sword Dynasty has suffered enough. Now, it's time to make those dynasties pay the price. Ling Mo Shu, who only had one left arm, also said coldly. The 13 swordsmen should be the ones to settle the score, not the prodigies of the other dynasties. The Sword Dynasty is the #1 dynasty of the 100 great dynasties. I hope you will not tarnish our reputation. Confuzi cupped his hands solemnly to Yiguchen and the other 13 swordsmen. We will not disappoint the dynasty. Yiguchen and the other 13 swordsmen said firmly. For a moment, the world changed color because of this aura. Yiguchen sighed because he still had to end everything in the battlefield of the prodigies. All the past grievances and grudges would be used in this battle. Life and death grudges, enemies must shed blood. Let's fight a peerless battle. Yiguchen stood with his hands behind his back, his black hair fluttering in the wind. In this battlefield of the prodigies, he would suppress all his enemies. Next, the Sword Dynasty's group boarded the floating warship and set off. On the eve of the opening of the sacred imperial world, various forces would enter the sacred city of Fortune. The sacred city of Fortune was a city at the edge of the sacred imperial world. It was famous because of the sacred imperial world. On the way to the sacred city of Fortune, Confuzi and Wu Hongyan also explained the various rules of the battlefield of the prodigies to Yiguchen and the others. The entire battlefield of the prodigies was divided into two parts. The front part was the sacred imperial world, and the back part was Sky Burial Island. Yiguchen already knew a lot about the sacred imperial world. It was the immortal Saint Emperor's small world, which contained many opportunities. As for Sky Burial Island, Yiguchen knew nothing about it. After the sacred imperial world is Sky Burial Island, so it's not too late to talk about it later. But what I can tell you now is that Sky Burial Island is far crueler than the sacred imperial world, because there will be super prodigies from the dark world, Wu Hongyan said solemnly. Dark world. Yiguchen narrowed his eyes. He already knew a little about the dark world. Demon Sword Emperor Jitian, Blood Tower Master Shui Yiqing, Shui Er, and Yitsangshan, who had appeared on the Azura Bloody Road, were all related to the dark world. What kind of existence was the dark world? Why would it fight with the South Horizon region? Would he see Shui Er again on Sky Burial Island? Chapter 12-11. These matters were related to some of the secrets of the South Horizon region. Yiguchen could not figure it out at the moment. You don't have to think too much about the Burial Island. Focus on the battle for the Holy Imperial World. The most important thing is to seize the opportunity and become a venerable in the Heavenly Palace, Confuzi warned. The Burial Island was far crueler than the Holy Imperial World. The battles between the geniuses were more intense, not to mention that there would be powerful geniuses from the Dark World. To some extent, the Holy Imperial World was to give the geniuses of the Nantian region a chance to improve their strength. Of course, the competition was still fierce. Then, he told Yiguchen and the others some things about the Holy Imperial World. For example, the Holy Imperial World was very large. It was divided into the outer ring and the inner ring. The real opportunities were in the inner ring. Of course, the battles there were more intense. Most importantly, there were no rules against fighting to the death in the Holy Imperial World. That was to say, even if a genius died in the Holy Imperial World, the force behind him could only watch him die. They could not interfere in any way. Moreover, they could not interfere. The Holy Imperial World was a small world inside the immortal Saint Emperor. It was suppressed by the rules. Powerful beings could not enter the Holy Imperial World. Moreover, the immortal Saint Emperor might want to pass down the opportunity to the younger generation. Therefore, some of the older cultivators could not enter the Holy Imperial World. That was to say, in the Holy Imperial World, they had to rely on their own strength. Those who relied on their background were not destined to live long. This is the kind of battlefield I want. Yiguchen was not afraid at all. Instead, a smile appeared on his face. He had relied on his own strength all the way. A person like him would have a good life in the Holy Imperial World. But you have to be careful. The geniuses of the War God Dynasty, the Mola Dynasty, and the Tyrant Blade Dynasty are not easy to deal with, Confuzi warned. He was afraid that the 13 swordsmen would underestimate the enemy. Yes, I heard that the white-haired sword demon appeared in the Mola Dynasty. He is very powerful. He killed many people in the Azura Bloody Road. He can even compete with Gu Xiaoyang, one of the top 10 young masters, Wu Hongyan said in a serious tone. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's heart trembled. I've also heard about it. Even if the white-haired sword demon's strength hasn't reached the level of the 10 great childs, I'm afraid he's not far from it. Jian Jinghong's expression was equally solemn. Moreover, the white-haired sword demon seems to have become the prince consort of the Molo dynasty, marrying Princess Luoho. At that time, for Jinkue. Some of the people present looked at Yiguchen. They all knew that Yiguchen and Princess Luoho had some conflicts when they were in the Holy Dynasty's treasury. When Yiguchen saw this, he could not help but laugh in his heart. He didn't expect that one of his clones would make such a name for himself, to the point that even the prodigies of the Sword Dynasty were wary of him. Don't worry. Leave that Duguchilma to me. Yiguchen waved his hand and said in a relaxed tone. It's better not to underestimate the enemy. Jian Jinghong, Xuanlian, Jiang Fengmian, Su Zihao, and the others all advised with a solemn expression. Underestimating the enemy is a big mistake. Wu Hongyan also put on a stern face and solemnly warned Yiguchen. Yiguchen nodded slightly. He was a little speechless. Not only would Dugu Qiuma not obstruct him and the Sword Dynasty. Instead, he would become an important helper for Yiguchen to suppress all his enemies. Next, Yiguchen and the others discussed the details of the Holy Imperial World as they headed to the Holy City of Fortune. The Holy Imperial World was located in the eastern region of the Nantian region. The Holy City of Fortune was thousands of miles away from the Holy Imperial World. It was located in a dangerous mountain range with a myriad of scenery. After half a month, the Sword Dynasty's team finally arrived at the Holy City of Fortune. Yiguchen stood on the deck and looked into the distance. He saw a magnificent city standing in the middle of the mountain range. The surrounding mountains seemed to be the city's walls. It was so vast that it was bigger than 10 Sword Imperial cities combined. However, it was understandable. Many forces in the South Horizon region gathered here. The number of people was extremely terrifying. Even though the entire Holy City of Fortune was extremely huge, looking down from the sky, the flow of people was still extremely dense. "Let's go to the place where we'll settle down first," Confuzi said. The Sword Dynasty's team landed in an area of the Holy City of Fortune. It was an area exclusive to the Sword Dynasty. Looking at the team descending from the sky, countless people in the Holy City of Fortune cast their gazes over. "That's the Sword Dynasty's team, Tisk Tsk. I heard that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkue's spiritual palace was destroyed by Huang Qianqiu. I thought he wouldn't come, but he still came." Looking at the 13 swordsmen standing at the bow of the ship, especially Yiguchen in the lead, many people in the city whispered to each other, revealing all kinds of playful tones. Yiguchen also felt that there were some cold eyes staring at him in the dark, with a strong sense of hostility. "Ah, this is good. My enemies are all gathered together. I'll get rid of them all at once." Yiguchen sneered in his heart. After that, Yiguchen and the others also entered the Sword Dynasty's area. There were all kinds of pavilions, and they could choose a place to stay. Chapter 12:12. Before long, Yiguchen and the rest of the 13 sword princes arrived at the location of the martial tablet and the sacred lotus. The sacred lotus was located in the central square of the sacred city of Fortune. Its history was as long as the sacred imperial world. There were rumors that the sacred lotus might be related to the sacred imperial world and the immortality sacred emperor. However, after a long period of research, other than knowing that the sacred lotus had the ability to test one's aptitude, there were no other uses for it. As for the martial tablet, it was built by later generations and stood not far from the sacred lotus. When Yiguchen arrived, there was already a sea of people around him. Those who came to the sacred city of Fortune for the first time were all here to test their aptitude. Yiguchen looked over and saw a huge golden lotus standing on the square. It was a dazzling golden color and it was very eye-catching. Yiguchen counted carefully. The entire sacred lotus had 50 petals. Jian Jinghong explained, "This sacred lotus has 50 petals. When testing one's aptitude, the more petals there are, the stronger the aptitude." "I see." Yiguchen nodded slightly. Jian Jinghong continued, "Brother Dugu, do you know how many leaves the holy lotus has ever sprouted?" "How many?" Yiguchen raised an eyebrow. 49 leaves, Jian Jinghong said with a hint of emotion in his voice. Even though he was born with the creation sword intent and had outstanding strength, it was obvious that he couldn't reach the level of 49 leaves. "Oh, only one leaf away from perfection. Who set the record?" Yiguchen was slightly surprised and asked. "Heavenly God Sword Sect, Di Haotian," Jian Jinghong said. Boom! A surge of aura erupted from Yiguchen's body. "Brother Dugu, what's wrong?" Jian Jinghong asked. In the Sword Dynasty, only Proud Divine Continent, Ling Qianhen, Mu Xingzu, and a few others knew about Yi Guqin's true identity. Jian Jinghong didn't know about Yi Guqin's true identity, so he didn't understand why Yi Guqin would have such a reaction. Phew. Yi Guqin exhaled deeply and restrained his aura. Upon hearing this name, Yi Guqin had an instinctive reaction. Isn't that Di Haotian known to be a rank 10 utmost exalted, born with a perfect body? Even he is unable to fully open the Saint Lotus? After calming down, Yi Guqin asked. Logically speaking, Di Haotian's aptitude should be perfect. After all, in the entire South Horizon region, there weren't many 10th grade supremes. Jian Jinghong explained, you don't know about this. In the Dian, there are 49 leaves. Many people think that the limit of the Holy Lotus is 49 leaves. Therefore, Di Haotian should be the one who's closest to perfection. Has no one ever sprouted 50 leaves on the Holy Lotus before? Yi Guqin's eyes shone with a profound light. Never. Jian Jinghong shook his head. Han Lingxian, Ling Moyin, Suki Miyazaki, Yushan, Xiao Jun, and the others' combat strength and aptitude were not bad. After all, they were carefully selected. However, they were not as stunning as Kong Kong. Then, it was Ling Mo Shu, Su Zihao, Jiang Fengmian, and the others. Their combat strength was slightly stronger, and their aptitudes were not bad. Finally, it was Mu Xingzu, Xuanlian, and Jian Jinghong. Mu Xingzu had the innate ability, the undying soul pearl, given to her by Ying Ning. With Yi Guqin's guidance, her strength was ranked among the top 5 among the 13 swordsmen. Xuanlian, on the other hand, had always been one of the top figures in the Sword Dynasty. Jian Jinghong, on the other hand, had always been the most famous prodigy in the Sword Dynasty. He was born with the heavenly Tao sword intent between his brows. Now that it had transformed into the heavenly sword Tao, his strength was even more powerful. Jian Jinghong was tested on the martial steel. His combat strength was at the 89th layer. He was only 1 layer away from the 90th layer. During the test of the Saint Lotus, Jian Jinghong had also sprouted 38 leaves. Although he did not reach 40 leaves, it was still a stunning achievement. It could be said that other than Yi Guqin, there was no one else. Jian Jinghong and Xuanlian were the leaders of the team. That's the first dynasty for you. You can't be underestimated. Even in the Holy Imperial Universe, you can probably sweep away a region. The performance of Jian Jinghong and the others made the geniuses of the other dynasties less contemptuous of the Sword Dynasty and more vigilant. But then, the atmosphere became a little strange. This was because everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Guqin. If Jin Kuei and the others had such a performance, then what could Yi Guqin, who was from the Sword Dynasty, do? Especially when the divine dwellings were crippled, many people had a playful look in their eyes. Would this Jin Kuei from the Sword Dynasty seek his own humiliation and step forward to be tested? Young Master Chen, why are you talking to a cripple? Zhao Weihuang sneered. Chen Qingshao shook his head slightly and said, I'm just curious. What's so special about the person that made senior brother Huang Qianqiu take action? But now, it seems that he's just so. You. The faces of the people from the Sword Dynasty were cold. Chen Qingshao continued, birds of a feather flock together. To be able to follow your lead, it can be seen that the other sword princes of the Sword Dynasty are just so. Chen Qingshao was very disappointed. He actually wanted to recruit the 13th sword prince of the Sword Dynasty. Of course, he also wanted to fulfill Huang Qianqiu's orders and take in Jiankui as a servant. However, Yi Guqin's strength disappointed Qin Qingshao. There was no use in having such a crippled servant. Yi Guqin's eyes darkened slightly. Yi Guqin did not care about the criticism, but if it implicated the other sword princes, Yi Guqin would not allow it. He said indifferently, "Even if my spiritual palace is crippled, it's not something you can talk about." Oh. Qin Qingshao raised his eyebrows slightly. Yi Guqin did not say a word and walked towards the martial tablet. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to reveal astonished expressions. Is Jiankui going to the martial tablet to take the test? Is his spiritual palace not crippled? Many people were surprised. Zhao Weihuang and the others also stared at Yi Guqin with different expressions. Yi Guqin walked to the martial tablet and let out a deep breath. He did not want to show his strength, but the flies were too noisy. Yi Guqin did not use the power of his spiritual palace. Instead, he used the power of his physical body. The ancient god power in his body surged, and a huge force rampaged through his meridians. He punched at the martial tablet, and an ear-piercing sound burst out. Terrifying waves of air swept in all directions. Some of the weaker cultivators, such as the princes and princesses of the great Qian dynasty, were directly pushed back by the waves of air. A dazzling brilliance spread out from the martial tablet, blinding everyone's eyes. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.